I've gone through a little bit of therapy for a little while and just learned more about what it means to be a child of an alcoholic, essentially is what it is, an alcoholic addict in some way. And, the classic kind of things that you see in that, where I didn't want to invite friends over. I always wanted to go to other friends' house. It was always coming home from school, you were wondering what you'd come home to. Would he be, there were several suicide attempts, to be honest, especially when I was in high school. So I remember coming home a few times and finding him essentially dead and having to call the ambulance and watch them, revive him, bring him back to life, take him to the hospital. And those moments in my life were very, very formative to me. And to your point before it's more about lessons learned, what not to do. I'm like, I don't want to watch Train Spotting. I don't want to watch a group of people fall into despair while they do heroin. With my dad gone, or not gone, but there, but not there most of the time. My mom was the one who was a primary breadwinner. And so again, she was at work. So I'd come home and that started when I was pretty young, typical latchkey kid that you talk about. And, there's a lot of times when you realize that certain people in your life, no matter what you do, will always kind of hold you back.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Chief here, the professional problem solver, coming to you live for another episode of The Overcomers. Today, we have Christopher Lovett as our guest. He's a professional engineer. He moved to Las Vegas in 1994, and he was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base until 1997. He was honorably discharged in 97 to finish schooling at UNLV, graduating in 2000. He began working in the engineering industry as an intern in 1998 and became a licensed electrical engineer in 2005. His work throughout the years includes Cosmopolitan, Trump Towers, Sky on the Strip, Fontainebleau, and various projects throughout Nevada, California, Arizona, Oregon, New Mexico, Florida, and Louisiana. He started Revolution Engineering in 2017 with 5-people team and has since grown the company to more than 15 people. His determination and love for the industry has helped fuel Revolution to the top 5% of small businesses in the United States. And Revolution Engineering was created to revolutionize the AEC industry, but it has since revised its mission to revolutionize small businesses everywhere. With a 4-day work week, unlimited PTO, remote work, and flexible schedules, the company isn't your average small business. Chris hopes to use the knowledge he has gained throughout the years to change the lives of people across the country. We're going to learn a lot about how to grow our small business from Chris. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Chris Lovett. Welcome, Chris.
How you doing?
Doing really well. Thank you so much for accepting our invite. And by tradition, we start with a question about your upbringing. So if you could be so kind, please take us back to your parents and grandparents. I believe that there's a ripple effect, and sometimes we continue our grandparents' mission, and sometimes there are amazing warnings and examples from our grandparents. So take us from your mom's side and then your dad's side. Share with us, what do you remember from your grandparents? What are some warnings, some examples, some principles that were passed on? And then share with us a little bit about your parents.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so I was born in a small town called El Centro in very Southern California. It's right across the border from Mexico there. It's probably a 15-minute drive. It's just east of San Diego. Interestingly enough, I don't remember a lot about my grandparents. We didn't have a strong relationship with them, unfortunately. We moved away from that area when I was about 3 years old and moved to San Jose. But you know, some of the things I did have a strong relationship with my mother's mother, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. As she aged, she actually moved to Las Vegas, and we helped take care of her, and was there when she passed. She was a very, very kind woman. Her husband, my grandfather, died when my mother was 12, so I never had the opportunity to meet him. But he was my understanding, you know, from what I've heard, a really great man. Was served in World War II in the Pacific. And like many of those men from that day, you know, just really great, strong-willed men who provided a lot for their family, but unfortunately just came across a rare illness and died when my mom was 12. So I never had the opportunity to meet him. So I know that they struggled quite a bit growing up. You know, my grandmother did her best to provide for them, but she had 3 children. You know, my mother was the oldest. I was the first grandchild. And we moved away when I was fairly young, when I was about 3 years old, and we moved to San Jose. So I didn't see her much when I was young until probably later on in life. My grandmother moved closer to us, probably after her last son moved out of the house, and they all kind of moved closer to us in San Jose there. And I finally did get to have some relationship with my grandmother. You know, would stay the night like all kids do over the weekend. But it was probably about that time that I lost touch with my father's side of the family. I don't remember much about them other than my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, had already kind of, when I started seeing her more, she'd already kind of slowly was deteriorating, and she had a lot of mental health issues. And just, you know, at the time, there wasn't really nobody really knew what to do. So this is my grandfather taking care of her. So the most I remember about my grandfather was he worked for the water district down there in the Imperial Valley for 50 years. I mean, just was that kind of standard, what everybody thinks of that generation, just staying at the same company and doing the same thing over and over and over and over. So long that they had given him, you know, all the pendants and the pins and the diamond watches and all those things that you get when you work for a company, when you used to work for a company like that for 50 plus years. So very, very dedicated individual. When I started, you know, remembering more about him when I was 7, 8, 9 years old and visiting them a little more often, was that he was very meticulous. He had a lot of attention to detail. Like I said, worked for that company for a long time. And that attention to detail carried over. He loved railroad watches and started to learn how to repair railroad watches, and then would trade them with friends of his. That was like just his exciting thing during retirement, was to go visit a friend. He would bring over a bunch of watches, and it was kind of funny because they would trade, and he'd go, "Ooh, I really like that watch right there." And his friend would say, "Well, that one's not working." He's like, "Well, I'll tell you what, why don't you give me 2 of those or 3 of those watches, and I'll give you this one." And then he would take them back and he would repair those watches, and then he would come back with those same watches to that same friend and then trade them again. So he was always kind of getting this better deal, you know, trading up for these other watches that he would then fix and maybe trade one back to his friend and trade another back to another friend. And so he was just always kind of this, you know, creative and I guess, you know, finding ways to just have a good time with this, you know, so to speak. So, you know, again, he died probably when I was about 30, 32 years old, something like that. Not a super strong relationship with my grandfather, you know, to be honest. I would say probably more with my maternal grandmother than anything else. So we moved around a lot when I was a kid, and so it was really hard to stay connected with them, stay connected with my family, you know, my extended family like that in general. So most of the experiences that I had with whether it's aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, those types of things were brief and have probably grown a little more over the years, but not as much influence on my childhood.
And what about your parents?
So my parents, like I said, we moved around a lot. I think the longest we stayed in any one place was we stayed in one house in San Jose for 3 years. We moved from there to a little house in just not too far away, and then we moved down to Southern California in the high desert area in Barstow, and stayed in a house there for about a year. Moved out to a small town called Hinckley, and Hinckley, if anybody's seen the movie Aaron Brockovich, that's the town of Hinckley. And they make it seem much bigger in the movie than it is in reality. It's a tiny farming town off of Highway 58 in Southern California in the high desert. Lived out there for a couple of years, moved back into town into Barstow for a year, moved back, and then moved into a town called Hesperia in Southern California, which is, again, just kind of north of Los Angeles area in the high desert still. But all that to say is that we moved around a lot when I was a kid. And for the most part, that was probably the most defining moments of my life. My father was addicted to pain meds, before we knew about what today we call the opioid epidemic. He was a victim of that for sure. He had injured his back when we lived in San Jose, and the reason we moved around a lot was he struggled to find good work after he injured his back. And then it was a time when still pre-internet, all that type of stuff, and he just had, just like you would see in a movie or something, he had a list of 4 or 5 doctors that he could call, and if he ran out of a prescription and one doctor wouldn't refill it, he'd call another one and get another one. And I just remember, even from a very young age, him having a lot of different medications he was taking. And essentially he would sleep all day when I was at school, and I'd come home, he'd be asleep. We'd have dinner, he'd be asleep. I'd go to bed, he'd wake up, and he'd get up and watch TV all night. He might be up in the morning when I got up to go to school, and I might be able to say hi, but then I'd go to school and come back, and he'd be right back in bed again. So didn't have, it was a really kind of tough time, and it was very formative years for me as a kid. This is all when I was in junior high and high school. So it was classic kind of, since then I've gone through a little bit of therapy for a little while, and just learned more about what it means to be a child of an alcoholic, essentially is what it is, alcoholic addict in some way. And, the classic kind of things that you see in that, where I didn't want to invite friends over. I always wanted to go over to other friends' house. It was always coming home from school, you were wondering what you'd come home to. Would he be, there were several suicide attempts, to be honest, especially when I was in high school. So I remember coming home a few times and finding him essentially dead, and having to call the ambulance and watch them, revive him, bring him back to life, take him to the hospital, and he'd be back 3 or 4 days later, say he's going to get clean, and then wouldn't happen. A few months later, back in the hospital. A lot of things like that. So those moments in my life were very, very formative to me. And to your point before it's more about lessons learned, what not to do. I struggle to this day to watch movies where, everybody loves, oh, you got to see Train Spotting. I'm like, I don't want to watch Train Spotting. I don't want to watch a group of people fall into despair while they do heroin. It's not interesting to me. I don't watch those types of movies. I don't like them. Because of that reason, because I lived that in my life. With my dad gone, or not gone, but not there most of the time, my mom was the one who was a primary breadwinner. And so, again, she was at work. So I'd come home, and that started when I was pretty young. Typical like latchkey kid that you talk about from the 70s and 80s. Come home, even as young as the 3rd grade, and no one's home. You just got to figure out what to do. Make sure you get your homework done. Try to make yourself a snack or something until mom and dad get home and can finally make dinner. Just kind of that very classic Gen X example that everybody talks about today. I would say that the good news that came out of that is that my dad finally did get clean, and it took the birth of my son, really. I joined the military in 1990, and I was in Biloxi, Mississippi for my schooling, and we'd come back to visit them for Christmas, and my son was maybe 3 months old. I just remember, we come in the door, and he just basically grabs my son and was hugging. My dad was always a very loving person, which was very, very good. So when he was clean and he was sober, he was very loving and loved my kids, loved me, loved our family. And he expressed that a lot, which was a good thing. So he finally, in that moment, I think it really just became very clear to him that he needed to be something more and something better. And from that point on, he was sober, which was amazing, because my kids, he's gone now. He died back in 2007, complications from all this stuff that he had done. He was probably not much older than I am now. I think he was 56, 57. I'm 53. So just to kind of show you what kind of a hard, drug-filled life can do. But they miss him to this day. They don't ever stop. My kids today don't stop talking about Papa, they called him, you know, and so he was a really good influence in their life. And I hope that if they ever had an opportunity to do something like this, and they said, "What about your grandparents?" they would have really strong memories of him, you know, because he was really good to them. So, which that's the most I could ever ask for, is that at some point he did clean himself up and not just fade away from suicide or drug overdose or something like that.
Yeah, it's good that you were able to see him overcome that, and he was a part of your children's life. I'm so
Sure.
sorry. I'm so sorry that he's gone now.
Yeah, you know, me too. I mean, there's certainly times that I miss him. I mean, there's times where a lot of the stuff I do now is just to say I want to make my dad proud. You know, there's a lot of things that I do. He was big into the bodybuilding scene in the 80s, like a lot of people were. You know, always had the bodybuilding magazines out, things like that. And so as a kid, I just remember people seeing my dad, and he was a big man. You know, I mean, he was 6 foot, you know, 240, muscular, big chest, big shoulders, all those things. And as a kid growing up, they're like, "Wow, how come you're not big like your dad?" And so I always wanted to be big like my dad. And certainly in my later years in life, started training a little harder, training a little more, doing a lot of things, strength training, stuff like that. And you know, I would love to. I competed in the powerlifting meet back in September, and you know, at that meet, I'm like, "Well, I wish my dad was here to see this. I wish my dad was here to see me, you know, squat 460 pounds and you know all that kind of stuff." So it's just one of those things that I was like, "Man, I wish my dad was here." And my mom was there, and I think because of a lot of that, I have a very strained relationship with my mother still. It's not the best that it could be. I try to maintain it as best I can, but you know, there's a lot of times when you realize that certain people in your life, no matter what you do, will always kind of hold you back a little. And that she's my mother, I love her, and I need to see her occasionally. But I also realize that I have to limit some of that contact because she is one of those people that kind of always pull you down, pull you down. As I grew in my career and my life, no matter what I did, it was always like, "Well, that's really great, you know, but I wish you would do this." It was like, you know, I graduated from college. She's like, "Oh, wow, that's fantastic. I'm so happy that you graduated. Now I wish you'd go back to church." Or, you know, "Oh, wow, that's a fantastic. You got your engineering license. That's a big milestone in your career. Now maybe you'll come back to church with me." And I'm just like, "Mom, it's not always about just going to church with you, you know." So it's just one of those things that I just have to kind of maintain a certain distance, you know, still contact her, still tell her I love her, call her occasionally, but it's certainly not a daily thing, but like it is maybe with some people.
You feel like there is a little disalignment in values and belief systems and ideology about life with your mom?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I mean, for sure. I think I probably get more of my values, and especially when I talk about business or how I try to solve certain problems, probably more from my dad than anything else. And then just some of the things that I've learned over the years. And I was pretty lucky when I was younger. Joining the military was a big step for me. You know, talk about kind of a turning moment in my life. There was a lot of things that I learned in the military, and I was lucky enough to have some really great mentors in the military. So if anything, I would say that the military had a bigger influence on my attitude and my values and some of the things that I do today than probably my parents, other than the sense of, like I said, what not to do, maybe.
Yeah. Well, it's our father's job to lead us into in the way that we must go, and sometimes when they're present but not really present, we we seek that discipline somewhere else, you know,
Hmm.
because without discipline, I don't know if we can achieve anything. And it was probably your subconscious or just looking for that accountability, if you want, and you knew you were meant to be stronger and you needed guidance and leadership. And that's one thing about military, that it really makes you tough, and it the discipline means that they're correcting certain behavior and disobedience with punishment. And
Hmm.
then once when you're out, you can kind of develop a self-discipline. So
For sure.
our relationship with our father is so critical, especially as men. So how many kids do you have now?
I have two kids. I have a son and a daughter. Um, And it's fun. They actually both work in my office now, which is really exciting. I really like. I didn't expect that. Neither one of them are engineers, and never really seemed to have the same passion that I had for engineering. So to have them working for me now is really exciting.
What are some parenting traits that were really good that you got from your parents that you're passing on to your children, and some warnings that you know you're determined not to pass on? Because I think we have inheritance that we leave our children with, and sometimes it's not financial, but it's certain habits, behavior, beliefs, if you want. Like my parents grew up in communism, so there's a lot of poverty mindset, a lot of limited beliefs, especially on my dad's side, and I am determined not to pass on this to my children. You know, I'm determined
Yeah.
to make sure my children grow up with abundance mindset. So I have to fight it because I'm like half and half. You know, half of me has been programmed this way, and the other half is fighting it, and it takes a lot of work when you're doing the work on your own. So I want to be the vessel, the point that stops the curse and creates the blessing. So I'm sure you have some ideas on parenting that you're like, hey, this was really cool the way my dad expressed his love and made us
Hmm.
feel loved in those moments, or maybe some things that your mom has done that were good successful strategies, and some things that were warnings, and you said to yourself as a kid, I'm not passing on to my children
Hmm.
that aspect of parenting.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to stay on the positive side, certainly, like I
Yeah.
said, my father showed a lot of love. When and whether even when I was younger, when he was there, and growing up, you always knew that he loved you. And I was an only child, and or I am still. That hasn't changed. But again, he always showed that love. You always knew he loved you no matter what. And then, my mom, it was interesting. I mean, she kind of, one of the things, again, from a positive side, and you could take it as positive or negative, but for me, it was a positive thing, was kind of let me do things on my own and figure things out on my own, and which for me is beneficial. As an engineer, I have to solve problems, and certainly something I learned from that experience of kind of being on my own and having to figure out, like, okay, what am I doing for breakfast today? Because my mom and dad are already at work, or my dad's asleep and my mom has left for work. What am I going to do for breakfast? I will figure it out. You know, what am I going to do for lunch? I'll figure it out. She was there. She would always make dinner. And so that was certainly a lesson, a positive lesson that I can take from that experience. And from the other side of thing, I think, again, the drug abuse stuff was a big deal for me. And the other thing for me was to always be there for my children when they needed me, no matter what that meant. And whether it's going to a soccer game, or being there for a school event, or because they're playing an instrument, or they're singing in the choir, or whatever that might be, but always trying to be there for them in any moment, and not missing out on the little small moments of their life. And so I always did whatever it took to make sure I was there for football, soccer, you know, music, whatever it might be. And I was blessed enough to be able to have the finances to support that. And I also think that, we as a family, we never really take things very, very seriously. We tease each other a lot, but we show each other a lot of love too. So it's just, and I think what it's done for them, my kids, I would say, people complain a lot about millennials. Oh my gosh, millennials, they do this, they do that. They're lazy. They don't want to work. They whine and cry about everything, whatever. And I don't think that's 100% true. And I think my kids are a great example of that. My kids are very hard workers. They don't whine about a lot of stuff. They're pretty easygoing. They, they don't, they're very positive people. And those are certainly things that, again, a lot of that learned from my dad, but a lot of that was like lesson learned. I want to be there for them, and I want to be, we want our relationship kind of lighthearted and all those types of things.
Yeah. No, this is great. Can you remember the first moment where you consciously realized you're alive? First moment that you remember from your life?
It's bad. Well, probably one of the first moments I remember is I got in trouble because I gave away my big wheel for a stick of gum. I was riding my big wheel. I was probably, I don't know, maybe 4 years old. And I was riding up and down the street, with other kids around. And this one kid came up to me and said, "I really like your big wheel. If I give you a piece of gum, will you let me have it?" And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds great. Sounds like a fair trade to me, you know." So that's probably one of the very first moments that I remember as a kid. A deal gone wrong.
And you've mentioned that you were moving a lot. Do you remember your first love?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's see. Yeah, I do. It was I was in junior high. I was in 8th grade, and I lived out in Hesperia, or no, excuse me, in Hinckley, in that little small town. And I just remember that there was this girl that I liked a lot, and so I started talking to her, trying to hold her hand, those types of things. And we would ride the bus together on the way home from school. And her stop was beyond my stop. But again, in 8th grade, oh, you're the big kid on campus in 8th grade. And then by then, you get to know people. And we had a very small school that went from kindergarten to 8th. So by the time you get to 8th grade, you know everybody, including the bus driver. So the bus driver, her stop was well beyond mine, but he would let me ride the bus with her all the way to her stop so I could drop her off at her stop. And then he would bring me back and drop me off at my stop because it was on his way back into the school.
He was your
So yeah,
wingman.
yeah. I just remember holding her hand on the bus the whole time, maybe trying to give her a kiss or something,
That's awesome. And how would you rate your top 3 moments of adversity so far? What are the 3 moments in your life that you faced a real challenge and it was really hard to overcome?
Yeah, probably the first one was when I left the military. I didn't have anything really to fall back on
Mm.
because I didn't retire. I got out after 7 years. I just was done. Was here in Las Vegas, and again, you said I was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base, and so we moved out, and my now ex-wife, but my wife at the time was a cosmetologist, and so she was cutting hair and doing nails and struggling to make ends meet, and I remember living in this small apartment, with 2 kids, and me trying to find odd jobs in any way I can while I'm going to school, and I was getting a little bit of money from the GI Bill, which was nice. That helped pay for certain things, but certainly we were scrimping and saving as much as we could. And, this is back when you were writing checks. And so I just remember, a lot of times you'd write a check on you'd wait till late Wednesday night because you needed some money. You didn't have enough money, but you needed milk and cereal for the next day for the kids to go to school. So you'd write a check late Wednesday night, hoping that it would get there, later on Friday after your check got there, so you could get your check in the bank really fast before that check tried to cash and got an overdraft fee. And it was always like this kind of like a game of roulette, this guessing game of, are you going to make it? Are you not going to make it? So a lot of adversity there while I struggled to go through college. So that was probably the really first big one like that. There's always these little small ones here and there, we weren't expecting my first son. He was a oops baby, kind of, so to speak. I mean, I guess you can't say oops when you're doing things that adults do to make babies and not taking the proper precautions. You can't call it an oops. It was, it is what it is. And I don't want to call my son an oops. I love him to death. He's amazing. And but certainly that's why I joined the military, was because my girlfriend got pregnant. I married her and had the baby and then joined the military and all that stuff. So anyway, there's all those little kinds of things, but that one was pretty difficult, pretty challenging, lots of financial struggles at the time, and to finish up school. And I'd say number 2 was right after I did finish up school. I graduate, I'm excited. I stayed at the company where I interned. They offered me a job. I stayed there and finally felt like I'm making good money, and my wife at the time, again, is still working. So I'm like, okay, we made it. We got a house now. We're excited. We got a house. And we've made it. Now we've got it. Now it's just kind of, let's just coast through, you know, until the kids graduate high school, and then we can do all these exciting things. And then I just remember my wife coming to me and saying, yeah, I don't want to be married anymore. I think you should move out. And it was a big blow, you know, because again, you feel like you've made it, you've achieved something, you've got it. And all of a sudden it's like, well, nope, sorry. Now you're getting a divorce. And now what are you going to do? So that was probably the second biggest moment in my life, to that adversity. The third one was starting this business, you know, from scratch. I had left. I was working for a company. This is back in 2011. I was working for a company, and I left them, and I said, well, I'm going to go out on my own. And I just did my own thing. It was just me for a little while, working on projects, doing everything. You know, you're the admin, you're the engineer, you're the drafter, you're the designer, you're doing it all. And but it was fun. I had a good time, and I made some decent money. And then I got a job offer from another company, and I went to work with them and helped them start an office here. They were a Hawaii-based company. And so I used my contacts in Las Vegas and built an office from scratch for that Hawaii-based company here in Las Vegas. And after about 5 years of that, I was like, you know, well, hey, I started this company for you, and I'm still not a partner. I'm still not, you know, anything really. I get a paycheck, which is great, but I kind of I grew the office from me, and we hired somebody like about 6 months later. And by the time I left, we had about 12 or 14 people here, you know, and we started from zero, slowly built up. And I think the last year I was there, I think I generated about $1.4 million in revenue after the course of, you know, 3 or 4 years, whatever it was, 20 some odd % profit, which is really unheard of in our industry. But growing that, and then realizing that I can't do this anymore. I can't work for somebody else who's not going to recognize what I've done for them. And so I started my own company again. This time, though, I took on 4 other people right away. So I had payroll, I had insurance, I had all those things immediately out the door. Yeah. So I basically emptied out my 401k that I built up over the, you know, 10, 15 years I've been in the industry, and emptied that out and said, hey, okay, here we go. And my current wife was and is still a huge support for that. You know, she was basically like, I know you can do it. I know you're smart enough. I know you can, I know you're, you know, savvy enough to work this business, and I know you're a hard worker, and I know you'll find a way to make it work. And so that's basically what we've done. But certainly a big step was to just start that with 5 people that we've now grown to like you said in the intro, 16, and you know, surpassed all the revenue that I made at the other place. And that place actually is kind of slowly fading away here in Las Vegas. I think they're down to 2 employees there. Anybody that I hired is gone from there. And the clients that I had helped them gain, they've since lost, who have now followed me to my business now. So, I mean, it wasn't, you know, not like I specifically targeted their clients just to say, hey, I don't want you guys around anymore. Their business doesn't affect my business at all. So I get business regardless if they do or not.
Yeah. Well, to go back to your first moment of adversity, you think this is the #1 reason for PTSD, like with other military men, that especially the ones that go to war, just the lack of camaraderie and the lack of structure and the release now in this world, and it's just disappointing the way the world is and the way people are in the workforce and just in other spheres of the community. You think that's the main reason why people have this like contrast in experience with life?
For sure. I mean, there's obviously that strong structure in the military. You know, I mean, everything is, you know, you're at work at 7. Well, for what I was doing, I mean, there's some jobs in there that are different hours and stuff, but for the most part, the military is very structured. You always know what you're doing, when you're doing it, how you're doing it, you know, and then there's a lot of security in that. And again, you have a lot of camaraderie.
Yeah.
I was stationed in Maine, very northern Maine, about 7 miles from the Canadian border. When I went to my first duty station out of school, and I just remember there, like every Saturday we were doing something, you know, whether it was going over to Joe's house for a barbecue or going over to, you know, Susie's for lunch or whatever it might be. Like we were going to different people's houses every weekend. And in Maine, what was funny is, you know, one of my am I trying to say? One of the leaders there, he had a house, and he would, in the winters, he would kind of cordon off this little area in his backyard and then water it down and freeze it over so you could skate in his backyard, ice skate in his backyard.
That's
So we'd
awesome.
invite everybody over and we'd go ice skating, and then we'd barbecue, or somebody go out hunting and come back with a moose, and you get moose burgers that weekend. And so it was always there was always something going on. And I went from there to Tacoma, Washington, and not as much, again, in northern Maine, not a whole lot to do, right? Unless, there's hunting, there's fishing, and there's watching the snowfall, I guess. So then I go to Tacoma, Washington, and again, a little bit more to do, but still a very friendly environment. And I was in the Air Force and worked on airplanes. And both of those bases were what they call combat ready, meaning that at any moment we could get the phone call to go to war, And so the number one priority at that base was making sure that plane flew and was fully operational. When I moved to Nellis, Vegas is a bustling town with a lot of stuff to do. And it's also a training base. It's not a combat ready base. So this is where they train pilots how to fight. They fly out over the middle of the desert. They pretend to get shot down, or they pretend to shoot other people down, and then they fly back. And so the most important thing here was not necessarily that the plane could fly, because there was always a backup plane, or that all of the systems were functioning. Obviously, if you're going to fly the plane, you need your navigation systems and things like that. But the systems that I worked on, my job was called electronic warfare. And basically what it meant is that we were responsible for making sure the plane didn't get shot down by a missile. So we had a lot of radar systems and then radar jamming systems on the plane that would fool a missile or whatever into thinking that it was a different plane or not going the right speed or whatever that might be, to avoid getting shot down. So our systems weren't critical because they're not going to get shot down over the middle of the desert in Nevada. There's nobody there to do that. So they would simulate that type of stuff, but it didn't really matter if our systems weren't 100% operational. So what became important at Nellis was, are the magazines organized in the right order? Is the floor swept? Did you cut your hair today? Did you shine your boots today? Things like that. And for me, coming from two bases where a lot of excitement, a lot of intensity, we've got this plane that came in at 6 o'clock at night. We've got to make sure it's ready to fly again at 8 in the morning. Let's work through the night and get that done. And there was a lot of, to your point, camaraderie in that. You've got 4 or 5 people working to get this plane functional and back in the air. And we're all doing everything we can to get it ready to go. And here, a lot of that was lost. And it was one of the reasons, when I was in Maine, my intent was, I'm going to do 20 years. I'm doing 20 years in the Air Force. And when I got here, I really got discouraged because some of that camaraderie was lost. That intense work environment that I enjoyed, that problem solving, again, as an engineer, I love solving problems. That problem solving wasn't there anymore. I remember one night somebody came in, and the magazine thing wasn't a joke. Somebody came in and they're like, last night we noticed that you guys kind of left the magazines in disarray. And I said, well, that's because we had a plane that we needed to fix, and we were out there working on it all night long, and we got it done. And they're like, okay, but just next time, make sure you put the magazines back in order. You're just like, okay, that sounds great. Thank you. So my frustration level grew, and it was at that time that I knew that I needed to be done,
Yeah. This is pretty awesome, working on stuff like that. Sounds pretty complicated. So the missile actually has to connect with your plane and have the precise location so they hit it, and you're trying to avoid that. That's difficult.
Yeah, you could think of it like, if you know how the police, when they use a speed gun on your car, essentially what's happening is they're shooting a signal out. It bounces off the car and comes back and hits the radar detector and says you're going 65 and a 45, or something like that. Missile uses a very, very similar technology. It's going to shoot, or even the radar that's trying to track where the missile is going to go, it's going to shoot a beam, out to the plane and try to track it in some way. And so if you can intercept that and say, that's not where the plane is, or the plane's going this fast or that fast, or there's 5 planes instead of 1 plane, and it confuses the missile, doesn't know where to go. And then as a last ditch effort, they'll do what they call chaff and flares. So the flares are for heat-seeking missiles, and they obviously burn very bright, much brighter than the engine of the plane. And so hopefully the missile hits the flare instead. And then chaff is just, you could think of it like a series of different strips of aluminum foil. Some of them are 3 inches long, some are 6, some are 18 inches long. And when they deploy the chaff, it's supposed to, again, confuse the missile and make it think it's a metal object and explode on that as opposed to the plane. And those are kind of two last-ditch efforts.
Yeah. When your wife told you the news that you're getting divorced, did you try to get some explanation? Because it looks like you were working so hard for stability and you got it, but maybe you missed some points of the relationship and you prioritized the stability too much. And women sometimes are hard to understand.
Say it ain't so.
Did you try to understand what happened, and did you gain any maturity or wisdom after that?
Yeah, for sure to both. You know, when, to your point about the stability, one of the upsides or downsides of being a child of an alcoholic like I am is that because my childhood had such turmoil, one of the things I'm looking for is this kind of constant, which is good and bad, both, constant stability. You know, I don't like moving around. I like living in one spot. You know, once I could finally settle down after the military, I lived in one place for 15 years. You know, I didn't want to move. I don't like change. But then sometimes my brain goes, well, wait, you're supposed to change. You know, so there are times when I'm like, I need to do something. I need to be someplace different. I need to move, or I need to go here. I need to go there. And then I've got to kind of calm myself down and realize that you know, it's like my mind sometimes seeks chaos. You know,
Yeah.
but I like the stability. So certainly when she came and said that, I asked a lot of why questions. Why? Or I remember when she's like, I think we need to kind of separate for a little while. And I was like, okay, well, maybe we can go to therapy. And she's like, yeah, let's do that. And so, and I was looking for a place to stay. We didn't have a lot of money. You know, again, I had just graduated. So it's not like I was making decent money, but not enough that I could afford two households. So I was trying to find a room that I could rent out for a little while. And we went to therapy. We went to exactly 2 sessions. And I remember that because the first session was all about me. And that's kind of where I learned about the child of an alcoholic thing. And so a lot of this stuff come out, well, you know, Chris is this and Chris does that and Chris, and all of these, you know, bad things that Chris does, and I agree, I'm not a perfect person. And then the second session was about my ex-wife, you know, and so it was like, well, what about you? Let's talk about you. And she's like, well, I don't want to talk about any of that. I don't want to talk about me. I want to talk about him and all the bad things that he does, you know. And so after that, she's like, I'm not going back to therapy anymore. So I remember asking her, I said, well, when I move out, I mean, is this thing we're still working on? And she said, no, it's not. We're not ever going to get back to where we were. And it was that moment that I realized that this is a divorce and that is what it is, and go from there. But when I asked her why, you know, it was kind of strange. And this is probably the most frustrating thing. Again, as an engineer, I'm looking for something that's concrete and exact.
Yeah.
You know, 2 + 2 is 4. I did this, therefore that happened. You know, I mean, if I had cheated or something, I would totally get it. You know, I cheated on you, therefore you don't want to be with me anymore. But that wasn't the case. And so I was like, I don't understand. And she just was, I just don't love you anymore. And I'm like, I don't understand what that means. You know, learning that now, and being in a more successful marriage now for much longer. It'll be 20 years in December. Whereas my previous marriage was just under 10. Is that love takes on many forms, you know,
Yeah.
and it's not. And I think her definition was love is I need to feel butterflies in my stomach every time I see you. And I'm like, I don't. That's just that's her definition. It is what it is. You know, so that was a lesson that I learned from that is that love takes on many forms, and it's not always perfect, you know. But I think that she was looking for this perfect version of love that was, I see you, I get stars in my eyes, I feel butterflies in my stomach, I feel overwhelmed with emotion, and that wasn't happening for her anymore with me. And so it took a long time to get over that, again, because you know, I'm always looking for that specific reason, not subjective to an emotion, more objective about you did this, therefore that happened. Because if you know that I could fix, you know, is it because I didn't touch you enough, I didn't kiss you enough, I didn't, you know, do this enough, or maybe I did it too much, you know, I can fix that. And it was like, no, I just don't love you. So it was a tough time for sure.
Yeah. And sometimes relationships start with the wrong intentions. And you've mentioned that her definition for love is butterflies in the stomach. What is your definition for love, and has it changed through the years?
Yeah, for sure. Boy, that's a great question. Definition for love. I mean, I think that it's just really that you have a very profound respect for somebody. You can understand their similarities and differences between you, and then you can, find ways to make that compatible with each other, and that you enjoy each other's company when you're around, and I split my time. I have an office in Las Vegas and an office in New Orleans, and I split my time between the two offices. And my wife lives in New Orleans the majority of the time, so we're separated. I'll spend 2 weeks in Vegas, 2 weeks in New Orleans, and then she'll come out for 1 week in Las Vegas. So I've at least separated from her for a week. There's times when it's been longer for various reasons, and so when I see her again, even though we've talked on the phone, we FaceTime on the phone every day, when I see her again, there's still this feeling of, oh my, you're here. I don't want you to not be here. And then she's very, very supportive, and I think love takes on many forms. Her way of showing me love is to support me in this endeavor and understand that, there's times when I got to work late, or I've got to fly out here and not be there in New Orleans. But she still supports me in everything I do, because she understands that I'm doing it for the betterment of my family.
Yeah. I used to think love is sacrifice for the longest time, for like 20 years. And I felt that sacrifice is necessary for love. But recently, I've changed my definition because I realized that sacrifice is easy. Even your dad went through that when he was going through the pain and the addiction with the opioids. And I could only imagine how hard it was for him, because these opioids, they're not, that's exactly the opposite of love. Hate is not the opposite of love. Hate is a form of love.
Mm-hmm.
Indifference is the opposite of love. And that's what these opioids do. They shut down the pain, but also the emotional pain as well.
Sure.
So he was suicidal because he wanted to stop this inability, to stop this not being able to love, because he was a great loving person. And so I think love, my new definition is that, sacrifice is easy, obedience is hard. Everybody is like, I'm willing to die, but are you willing to live?
Yeah.
Wow, it's hard.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
And because every time when it's really, really, really hard, and our self-sabotage and our self-talk and the enemies in our mind are trying to shut us down, but there's always a big breakthrough afterwards. And you had, look what happened to you. I mean, you had a wife that was looking for 24/7 romance, and now you have the opposite of that, wife that realizes that the world has to be practical, not just emotional, and she's giving you the support. That's the perfect example of behind every great man there is a great woman. And
For sure.
she's doing that. So I'm glad you overcame the divorce. Was one of the kids from the first marriage?
Both were from the first marriage. Yeah. So my son was born in 1990 while I was in the military, and then my daughter was 3 years later, 1993, and still in the military. Yeah. So both of my kids are from my first marriage.
Good. And
Yeah.
both towns, New Orleans and Vegas, are party cities. But based on what I'm
Sure. Yeah.
My wife and I, we took for our honeymoon, we took a road trip because we wanted to go to so many different destinations, and New Orleans was one of them. We spent 2 nights in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And it was a wild time.
For sure.
We stayed at the French Quarters. It was good.
Yeah.
It's a magical town, and the food is amazing. Probably the most incredible food.
Yeah, that's one of the things. So we're flying. My wife's going to fly out a week from today to Vegas. We have our business office Christmas party on Saturday, and then her and I fly back to New Orleans on Monday. And she's already sent me 3 dinner reservations for while we're in New Orleans.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. It's great. And the people are so, New Orleans has a very unique vibe. I'm from Europe, so it reminds me a lot of Europe. And it's just
For sure.
the different people there, the different cultures, the melting pot of different cultures. It's so rewarding to be there. It's one of my favorite places on earth. And there's a lot of excitement and love, and there's a lot of sadness, and it's just
Yes,
it's like a roller coaster of emotions
it is.
in
Yeah,
there.
sure.
The
Yeah, I
whole
always say it's a love-hate kind of town, and it's a
Yeah.
beautiful place, and I love being there. And sometimes I get frustrated because you see things like the roads just falling apart, or crime has been going up. I'm sure everybody's seeing that in the news. Crime has gone up some, and we seem to be battling with Chicago for most murders per capita.
St.
But
Louis is doing a good job too.
St. Louis likes doing that too. Yeah, they like to kind of trade places for some reason. So it's one of those kind of places that, boy, you love it when you're there. And like you said, the people are amazing. The sights, the sounds, the smells, it's amazing. Unless you're on Bourbon Street, the smells might not be so amazing. But yeah, it's just it's a great place, but there is that dichotomy of the sadness there too. There's especially after there's still some of the remnants of Katrina, and then 10 years later, it was 10 years or 15 years, whatever, Ida hit in 2021. And same thing, not as damaging from a flood standpoint, but certainly damaging from winds and rains. And so, but it's resilient. It's a resilient town for sure.
Yeah, and there is a lot of artificial love, especially after midnight on Bourbon Street. A lot of
For
you
sure.
you see a lot of people just going for drugs and alcohol, and based on our conversation so far, it looks like you have different relationship with drugs and alcohol. Like you don't support drugs and alcohol too much.
Yeah, I'll say, yeah. Look, I'm like every other person out there. I smoke, but I didn't inhale. No, I mean, I tried weed as a kid. I smoked weed as a kid. That's about as heaviest as I got into any drugs. I never did anything beyond that. And I think because of that fear, that fear of like, am I going to fall into a downward spiral like my father did? So I dabbled with it in junior high and high school a little bit, but not a whole lot. And then as an adult, I was in the military. I couldn't, for the first 7 years of my life. And then when I got out and I've got 2 kids and a wife, and I didn't have the opportunity really. As an adult, every now and then, maybe I might take a hit on a joint. I have a buddy of mine in New Orleans who's a musician, and he comes over and I'll smoke a cigar. He'll smoke a cigar, but he'll also smoke a little bit of a joint, and he'll be like, hey, you want to try some? And maybe like once a year, I'll be like, all right, fine. But it doesn't, I realized very quickly that all it does is make me tired, and I feel lazy, and I don't want to be tired and lazy. I'm a very energetic person. I want to be up and moving and going around and doing different things. And so that feeling doesn't appeal to me, I do have a love for bourbon. And I have been able to find a good balance. I'm not a regular drinker at all, but on a Saturday night, I might sit on the balcony, whether it's New Orleans or here in Las Vegas, and have a glass of bourbon with a cigar and just kind of enjoy the night. But I always watch myself to make sure that it's not a regular thing, but I like it. I do like it every now and then. I've got, I don't know, some people might call me a collector. I'm looking around at my bottles, but some people might call me a collector. I like to drink it, but I'm not drinking it every night.
What's your favorite bourbon and your favorite cigar?
My favorite cigar right now is it's called Leather Rose. It's from a company called Deadwood, and I like them because they're a little smaller. They're not, when I smoke cigar, I want to kind of do it for maybe 30 to 45 minutes. I'm not one that has like a 2-hour experience with a cigar. I kind of, again, I think because I want to be on the move, and usually it's at night, and I'm kind of winding down for the night, so I don't want to be out there for 2 hours. And that's my favorite cigar, is again called Leather Rose, and it's from a company called Deadwood. My favorite bourbon is probably E.H. Taylor. But yeah, either that or maybe Blanton's. I like Eagle Rose, and if you can find it, or Eagle Rare, excuse me, Eagle Rare. And if you can find Eagle Rare at a really good price, it's a great bourbon, and it's a 10-year bourbon. So you used to be able to find it for about $30 a bottle, but prices have gone up a little bit, and some people think it's really popular, so they want to sell it for $60 a bottle. That's how the bourbon market goes sometimes.
What about your favorite meal?
I'm a breakfast guy, and I have the same thing for breakfast every single day. I'm bacon and eggs and berries. I love bacon and eggs and berries. I just had that for breakfast this morning. Other than that, I like a good steak. I'm basically on I'll call it carnivore-ish diet. I have some berries occasionally. I'll have maybe a sweet potato or something like that every now and then, a little bit of white rice. But I love a good steak. And I've got a thing tonight I'm going to. It's a steakhouse here in Las Vegas, and I'm going out to dinner there tonight. So I like that. And usually when my wife's more fish, she loves fish. She's kind of pescatarian. And so the nice thing about steakhouses is a lot of times they'll have a lot of great steaks, but they'll usually have some kind of like halibut or really good fish that she can eat. So it's a nice balance for us. What challenges me on a daily basis? I would say just probably staying motivated in the business, to be honest. It has its ups and downs being a business owner. So every day is something different. Usually it's, there might be an employee issue, or you're wondering where money's going to come from the next day. And so that's certainly a challenge every single day. So a lot of times it's just saying, there's a guy that I listen to, Ed Milet, and Ed's big saying is one more day, one more day. It kind of comes from AA. And I just try to take that mindset with it. Just one more day, one more day, one more day. And it 99% of the time works. Just yesterday I was like, oh boy, it's going to be a rough month. And then all of a sudden I sold 3 or 4 projects for, $100-something thousand in work, just in a couple of days. So, and then I got a call about another one this morning that's going to sell. So all of a sudden what looks like it's going to be a rough month at the end of the year, when you really want it to be a good month to start the 2024 fresh and in a positive direction, then all these things start to come into play. We got 2 or 3 new projects in the first couple of days of the month, and then I got a call from another one today that's supposed to start next week. And so just that mentality of one more day has always panned out for me. Okay. Well,
share with us.
There was a question. There were some questions that came up.
Your life?
Oh, what books have changed my life? Well, I just answered a question a minute ago about One More Day. And there was a book by Ed Milet that's called One More. And he talks a lot about that one more day, one more. He takes it into a whole series of things, when you're in the gym, one more rep, when you're trying to make a call, one more sales call, just one more. That's been a big influence for me, trying to stay positive, especially as a business owner, that things vary up and down. Another book that I love and is called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. And that book, it's really interesting. And if you can listen to the audio version, I would recommend it 100%. Read it for sure, but listen to the audio version, because in the audio version, they actually have a different voice for Napoleon Hill and the devil. And the premise behind the book is he's interviewing the devil and asking, he has complete control over him and can ask any question that he wants, and the devil has to answer. He's required to answer. And it just talks about how the devil, or presence, or whatever you want to call it, opposition, he uses the term opposition, how opposition comes up in your life, and then why it's coming up, and what that opposition means, and why they're trying to do it. And it's fascinating to me, because it's this interview format. And again, listening to it is great, because they use 2 different voices for the devil and for Napoleon Hill. And it's a lot of things, he goes through all the typical things we even hear to this day. And the interesting thing about the book is it's, written in the 30s. And when you read it, you're like, wow, there's so many things that it applies to today. It's timeless. So I would say Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. And then the question here, what would you recommend for a daily motivation for a person like me that have to get product sales, but hit the wall frequently, or it gets heavy in a way? Thank you. I think I would go into the day with kind of a set plan, And then, whether if that's 5 sales calls or, motivation is a tough word because you're not always going to have motivation. So what you have to have instead is discipline. And so by writing those things down, by saying, okay, today I'm going to make, 10 sales calls. And then after I make the 10 sales calls, I'm going to, revamp my sales pitch, or I'm going to do whatever it is. And you pick 3 things or 3 to 5 things that you're going to do that day. And then at the end of the day, you're going to look at it and say, okay, I made 10 sales calls, or if you want to take the Ed Milet version and say I made 11 sales calls, fantastic. And then I did this next thing and I did this next thing. And then you check it off, and what you see is I won the day. It's a big Andy Frisella thing. And there's another, Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan talk about this a lot too in their books. And it's about celebrating your wins and celebrating your small wins so that you develop this discipline to do the same thing every single day. And so every day I go into, and it doesn't matter, even if it's a weekend, every day I go into the day, I have a journal, and I really got myself a really nice journal. It's like leather bound, and I can replace the book inside of it. And I got a really nice pen to go with it because I want to make sure that I write in it. And every day I write in my journal at the beginning of the day. I have 7 things that I write. And then I wrote a couple kind of affirmation type statements. But then the next thing I write down is my 3 wins. What are the 3 wins that I want to do today? And for me, it's I try to write. I'm trying to write blog posts and things for our office. So I want to write. And then the second one is business development. And because again, I'm the owner of my company. I have to be out there calling and selling. So I do business development calls for the day. And I try to do 1 new and 1 existing client for each of the offices that I have. And we're developing a 3rd office in Boulder, Colorado. So that's 6 phone calls for the day. And then I'll have another one that I have to do, whatever that is. Maybe it's a meeting that I have, a specific meeting that I have with somebody, or maybe it's something I need to do for the office for the business side of things. So those 3 things I write down. And then at the end of the night, I have another list of questions that I ask myself. It's what did I give today? What did I learn today? How did today affect my future? And then, how was today an investment in my future? And boy, I forgot the 4th one. But basically, I ask myself these 4 questions. And again, those come from Ed Milet. So just to finalize that. And then I'll say, okay, and here are my 3 wins. And I wanted to match the other 3 wins that I had. So I matched those 3 wins at the end of the night and say, yes, I did that, I did that, I did that. And sometimes they don't happen. Sometimes I might have to write down a different win. Yesterday was a perfect example of that. I was supposed to have coffee with somebody, a client. They had to cancel at the last minute. They had a sick kid, which was fine. So I did something different, and I wrote that down as my win. So, but it's not necessarily about motivation. It's more about discipline and discipline every single day. And for me, I carry that discipline through on the weekend. It's the same reason I get up at the same time every day. I don't stay up late on Friday nights and then roll out of bed at 10 o'clock. I try to go to bed between 8 and 9 every day. And I get up between 4 and 5 every day. And I do that so that I'm consistent in everything that I do and can maintain that discipline.
Oh, thank you so much for saving the day here, Chris. My power went off. So tell me, who's the person that had made the most influence in your life? Maybe someone you've met or someone you've studied, but who you think has made the most influence in your character, in who you are becoming now?
I would say this is kind of interesting. So no one's going to know who it is because it was the first person that I worked for in the engineering industry. And I always quote him because he said one of the most important things to me that I still use in my business today. His name is Rick Rayburn. So no one's really going to know him. Maybe he'll listen to this and thank me later. But his name is Rick Rayburn. He was the owner of the company where I worked. It was called RHR Engineering. It was in Las Vegas. And that's where I did a lot of those projects that you mentioned early on. I did Trump Tower when I was with him. I did Cosmopolitan. We worked on Bellagio in Paris and big hotels really all across the country. I just remember him talking to me one day and saying, Chris, everyone you work with now, because at the time I was a junior engineer, just starting out. And he said, the relationships you're developing now with these junior architects when you're working on these projects are going to be some of the most important relationships in your life, because when you decide to own your own business, they will be owning their own business, and you guys are going to find ways to work together. And that has 100% held true. Some of our best clients are clients that I met when I was 30 something years old in the industry, and those relationships have carried through until today. And we do a lot of work with those clients that I met 20, 25 years ago, you know.
What's one place that you would love to visit and travel to that you haven't yet? And what is one place that you would never visit, even if they offer you $10 million?
Oh, that's a lot of money. um, I want, my wife doesn't want to go here. I want to go to Iceland. I really want to go to Iceland. You know, my, probably obvious by my pale complexion and beard, a lot of history in Germany and Sweden for my in Northern Europe. But there's something different about Iceland that just really intrigues me. I would love to go there. It's too cold for my wife, so I might just have to go on my own, or maybe take my son or something. Maybe he'd love to go with me. And then one place I'd never visit. I'm not real keen on going to the Middle East. I'll be honest, for a lot of reasons. Although there are things in China that fascinate me, like the Great Wall of China being one of them. I don't know that I've just never been big on, you know, a lot of folks like to go to Asia because it's inexpensive. And, you know, my brother-in-law is like, oh, I went to Thailand. It was amazing. And I don't really have a desire to go to Southeast Asia or China or places like that. If somebody said $10 million, I'd probably go to Thailand, but I don't know that I'd go I don't know that I'd go to Iraq if somebody said, here's $10 million, you know? So,
You know, Iceland has such an amazing spirit. The people from Iceland, I follow soccer a lot, and they played against England in one of the European championships, and it was so, like, the odds of putting together 22 people based on their population are impossible. And they beat England, and
I
England.
remember that. Yeah.
So it was such an incredible, and like they have fewer fans than any other country, but they had this ahoo. They had this. They were so loud. So they have an amazing spirit. Probably the country with the most unity in the whole world.
Yeah.
So I'd love to go there.
Being on a small island like that. I mean, relatively speaking, it's a small island with a small population, you know. And I think there's something about that just type of epic cold weather that brings people together in a community, you know. Maine was a lot like that. Like that cold weather, you think everybody just wants to stay indoors and never do anything. But I think what it does is because you feel like you can easily get cooped up and get cabin fever, that you feel a need to connect with other humans during that time. You know, I think this is probably something that's very innate in us as humans, is that, wow, there's cold weather, we need to huddle together to stay warm. And I think that people during those times of cold months need that kind of connection. It's probably why the holidays are such big times for people to get together and have parties and you know, visit with each other, visit family, all those kinds of things. You feel this need during cold months to reconnect with people.
Yeah. No, for sure. My relationship with cold weather has changed a lot. I used to sell cars for 7 years, and I was very aggressive car salesman. So I would stay outside and wait for customers and just spend a lot of time outdoors. In Chicago, winters are pretty tough. So I used to go home with blue feet. They were like frozen, and hands. And when I started my company, the first 2 years, I didn't even buy a winter jacket. I was like, I will not stay in the cold, and I will just go from the car to the office and to the client or whatever. And that really made me soft towards cold weather. So then I became cold. I was cold even in the summertime. And then I did 75, and I did it in the summertime, and I realized, man, the reason why I did it in the summertime is because I'm afraid of the winter cold. So then I started doing it on January 1st. And now 3 years in a row, I'm actually going to do it again January 1st. I do it from January through March, and I do the whole live hard. So I'm looking forward to running in the snow, in the freezing weather. I think it does change your perspective. And if you make cold your friend, there's no refresher.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, you have to kind of suffer through some hard times, a cold shower or cold weather, whatever that might be, to really
Yeah.
enjoy the good times of the spring and summer.
Yeah, 5 minute cold showers I take every day.
Yeah, I did that. I
So you
haven't for a
gotta,
little while. But I did live hard last year, and I finished phase 2. I haven't started phase 3 yet, but
this is good. You're gonna start on January 1st?
yeah,
Awesome. We'll stay in touch.
yeah,
Keep each other accountable
right,
on those days that you want to get up and do nothing.
yeah, exactly.
What did you want it to be when you grow up, and have you become what you wanted to be, or who you want to be?
It was funny. I was going through something my mom with some stuff one day and going through, and I found an old paper from when I was like in 3rd grade. It said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And it said, "I want to be a pilot in the Air Force." So, I wasn't a pilot, but I was in the Air Force. But definitely in high school, I knew that I wanted to be an electrical engineer. I think that what happened is that's such a broad term. It's one of the reasons why we struggle to find good help right now. Electrical engineer is such a broad term. Engineer in general is a huge broad term.
Yeah.
Elon Musk still calls himself an engineer. So when I went to school, my vision of what an electrical engineer did was, I always wanted to create like a really cool radio for your car that you could skip ahead on a song, which is now called a CD, or Pandora at this point. Nobody even probably knows what CDs are anymore. But so I always wanted a cool, I was using cassette tapes, right? And so you'd have to fast forward and try to figure out when the end of the song was. And I'm like, no, I want to make my radio really cool that it knows exactly where the end of the song is. And somebody else invented it before I ever got out of college, I guess. But so even when I first started looking, I'm like, I was going to college and I was like, okay, I know I want to be an electrical engineer. And we were learning a lot about circuitry and all kinds of different things and silicon chips and all those things. And I remember when I was looking for my first job, I'm like, I'm just Yellow Pages. Open the Yellow Pages, go to electrical engineer and start making phone calls. That's what I did. And come across RHR consulting engineers. And he goes, yeah, that'd be great. Come on in. We'd love to interview and see what we can do. Go in, interview, get hired. And I realized, well, I'm drafting now and I'm working on floor plans for these hotels. But I really fell in love with it quickly because, you could see a plan, you could see this plan on the sheet, and then you could go out and see it being constructed right before your eyes, and it really just, you could see the end product, and then you could see people enjoying the end product, whether you're in a casino, they're playing the slots, or they're enjoying a restaurant, or whatever that might be. And I've done all variety of projects from, I did a small frozen yogurt shop in Hilo, Hawaii.
That's one of my favorite towns.
Yeah. And then I lived there for 3 years, and I did this small little yogurt shop, maybe 600 square feet, all the way to, Cosmopolitan, giant hotel, casino, condos, the whole 9 yards, convention center, retail spaces, everything. And I like them both for different reasons. When the frozen yogurt shop opened up in Hilo, I'm like, hey, the yogurt shop opened up. Let's go check it out,
Mm-hmm.
And we went and had frozen yogurt that night, And when I was younger, when I was first starting out my career, my responsibility for our office was we worked on a lot of the MGM resorts. So there was MGM, Treasure Island, Mirage, Bellagio, Mandalay Bay, New York, the Luxor. They had like 9 or 10 properties, for a while. And my responsibility was when they had a renovation to be done, whether it was a new restaurant or there was a back house office space, whatever it is, that was my job. I had to make sure it got done. And I remember one night I took my wife on a date and we went just to the MGM, and we went to a bar that I had done there to start the night and have a drink. And then we went to one restaurant for an appetizer. We went to a second restaurant for an entree. We went to a third restaurant for dessert. And then we went to another bar that I had done inside the MGM to have a final drink for the night. And then didn't do a nightclub at the MGM, but at the time we said, hey, let's go to the nightclub. And we actually walked across to Treasure Island, and not straight across, but we walked a little ways to Treasure Island and went to their nightclub because I'd done their nightclub at Treasure Island. So, that was a great time for me to say, I did this project. And the whole time I think I sat, I was like looking up at the lights and exit signs and looking behind the bar saying, where's the plug for the POS system, things like that, or where did you guys plug in the stereo system over here? So, I probably even asked if I could go in the back of house area and look at the kitchen, but I don't think they'd let me go. So, and I remember sitting there and go, I did this restaurant, and they're like, oh, well, that's really cool. We're still going to charge you for your food. Yeah. So I still get excited by that today. And I don't work on as many projects anymore because I'm doing mostly business development, running the business, but I still get excited to see the projects that we've completed,
What's your vision for the next 5 years? Where do you see yourself and your team and your family in the next 5 years?
I really want to grow this business. So, like I said earlier, we started the office here in Las Vegas. We had the New Orleans office for a few years now, probably about 2-3 years, and we're trying to really grow that. We earlier this year decided we were going to open an office in Boulder, Colorado, and then I actually have a meeting with a guy next week on Monday to talk about Kansas City, and he's kind of wanting to, I think, we've had some discussions about it, whether I buy him out or whether we merge or whether we take over his work because he's tired of doing this type of business. It could be a struggle at times, especially as a business owner, because our industry is very fluctuating. There's ups and downs constantly, and from one day to the next, you don't know what's going to happen, especially in a tourist town like Las Vegas. So he's kind of done with that up and down roller coaster ride. He's got very steady work doing some other things for engineering, and so he's like, hey, do you want to kind of take over some of this work for us? And so we're looking at Kansas City as an option. I've talked about opening an office in Hawaii before, and I do have an employee out in Hawaii, and I still have some clients out in Hawaii. So I would really like to get to a point where we have somewhere between 5 to 10 offices. It's a big goal of mine to have 5 to 10 offices with 50 to 100 employees. Each office basically looks the same. In Vegas here, I have a lot of remote workers. I probably have 5 or 6 people who work outside of Las Vegas. So in actual Las Vegas, I probably have, let's say, 12 to 14 people that work in the office here. Everybody else is remote. So I would like to see each one of those remote offices have 12 people, 12 to 15 people, and grow to that size. And our big goal, honestly, is we've found a great niche in multifamily work, and we're doing a lot of apartments right now. We started off kind of doing one back in 2019. It's really one of a kind here in Las Vegas. We don't have a lot of mixed use properties where there's retail, stores, restaurants on the bottom, and then apartments on the top. So we did a mixed use property in Henderson. It's a little suburb of Las Vegas here, and right on it's called Water Street. It's kind of their old district. It was the first street in Henderson kind of thing. And it's a 7-story. It's got restaurants and shops on the first floor. It's got office space on the second and third floor. And then it's got apartments on top of that. And it's very unique for Las Vegas. And that's our project. And we started there. And now we have a really good relationship with a developer in town that does probably 4 multifamily properties a year. And we've done some multifamily work in New Orleans. We're talking to multifamily architects in Boulder and in Kansas City to try to get work with them. So honestly, I'm speaking this into existence. We are the best mechanical, electrical, plumbing, engineering firm for multifamily. We're the choice for multifamily engineering. So I'm speaking that into existence today. That's going to happen in the next 5 years. And in order to do that, it's going to be that, 5 to 6 offices so we can support different areas nationwide. It's going to be 12 to 15 people in each offices so we can provide the proper support for that. There's some revenue goals that go along with that, but ultimately, I never really wanted to limit myself too much when it comes to that. My goal has always been to kind of change the way that engineering firms and architecture firms do business. It's like a lot of businesses. It's very time based. It's like, are you here at 8 o'clock? Did you make it on time to work or not? Are you at your desk at 5? Or are you gathering? It's 4:59. Why are you grabbing your purse? Why are you putting your stuff away? Don't get your backpack yet. You got to stay till 5. And so you find people just kind of sitting there, like looking at the clock, like when you're in school, and I'm like, I don't want people to do that. I want people to get their work done and go home. So we always call ourselves a results-based business.
Mm-hmm.
I read a book years and years ago, and I can never remember the title, but it's basically something around a 4-day work week. And I know Tim Ferriss does the 4-hour work week. The guy who wrote the book actually based it kind of around Tim Ferriss's 4-hour work week, but he did his on a 4-day work week, and he owned a surfboard shop or a paddleboard shop in San Diego. And he basically said, we're going to work from this time to this time. We're going to work 30 hours a week. And this is what we're going to do. And then everybody gets the rest of the time off. And he was like, we found ourselves getting as much work, if not more work done, because he took the mindset of, everybody has this mindset when it's vacation week. So I'm going to go on vacation on Monday. I'm going to work like crazy. No one's going to pull me away from my desk for water cooler talk to talk about the latest episode of Peaky Blinders or, whatever it might be. I'm head down in my work and not stopping because I got to go on vacation next week and I don't want anybody to call me. And it's like having that same mentality every day and then taking a 3-day weekend, every week, or a 4-day weekend when you have a normal 3-day weekend. So we've tried to take that mindset. It took us a little while to get there, but we finally just said, you know what, we're cutting the cord. We're doing it. It's 4-day work weeks. Here we go. What we told everybody is be available on Friday. So don't go, oh, hey, yeah, great. Friday's off. I'm taking the kids. We're going to Disneyland. It's like, no, be available. If you need to go to Disneyland, that's fine. Then just take that time off, So we implemented the 4-day work week thing. That's been going well. A few of us, what I found is that especially the leadership team, we'll do a little bit of work on Fridays. I'll answer a few emails here or there. But what it's done is it's really given me a Saturday, Sunday to myself. Whereas before, I'm working through Friday and then Saturday I'm playing that catch-up game, for things that I might have missed. Now I work Monday to Thursday. I play my catch-up game on Friday mornings, and then Friday afternoon I'm free to kind of do what I want, and that's the case for most of our leadership team. The junior staff is probably more full Friday off, So we'd implemented that. The other thing that always kind of drove me nuts in engineering firms is this idea, like we would work. I remember I was working at one office and I remember I was working until 2 a.m. one time because this is back when you had to get something to FedEx by 10 a.m. so you could overnight it. You were actually shipping plans to people. Now you just PDF it and you email it to them. But at the time we were shipping plans to folks. And so we worked until 2 o'clock in the morning. I went home. I took an hour-long nap. I showered. I was back in at 5 o'clock to get these plans ready to get them to FedEx by 10 so they could get there on Friday. And I just remember like Friday rolls around and I was like, hey, I'm gonna, it's 3 p.m. I'm like, I'm gonna go home. Wow, really? You're leaving early today? Well, no, because I worked until 2 the other night. Remember that? And then I came in 3 hours later again. Like, remember all that overtime I put in, So there was always this expectation to work 8 to 5. And then another time a lady came to me and she's like, that the Friday after Thanksgiving isn't a holiday. That's, you have to make that day up. And I was like, okay, I make it up. She goes, well, when did you make up your Friday after Thanksgiving? And I said, every week for the last 50 weeks, I've made it up. Go back and look at my timesheet, She's like, well, I came in and I only took a half an hour lunch for the last 2 weeks. And I'm like, that's fantastic. I come in and I work till 6, 7 o'clock every night. So count that time as my Friday off, So we said, we're not going to do that kind of stuff. We take all federal holidays and then some. And then we always had another example, and I'm sorry to keep going over this, but there was a guy that I worked with. Guy was coming in at 6 o'clock and work until 6, 7 o'clock every single night. And he comes in, and this is when I was in Hawaii, and he comes into the boss there and was like, hey, I need to take Friday. We lived in Hilo, and if you had major medical stuff, you had to fly to Honolulu. He's like, I've got to fly my wife to Honolulu on Friday. Can I take Friday off? And they're like, yep, absolutely. Just put in for PTO. And I said, he works 6 to 7 every single day, and you want him to put in PTO for Friday? Why can't you just give him that day to go take his wife to the doctor? So that was just always a struggle for me.
Yeah.
I didn't really get it, and they're like, well, we're not getting the above the line time. When you're looking at your P&L statement, right? There's a gross profit and a net profit. So the gross profit is kind of above the line. And they're like, well, his time when he's here working is above the line profit. He's our cost of goods sold, so to speak. But when he goes on vacation, it's below the line and it comes out of the net profit. And I was like, but all I really care about at the end of the day is the net profit at the bottom. Like that's what I want. So it doesn't really have that big of an effect overall on my numbers. So that's one thing, is that's why we got with the unlimited PTO, you know, and I always say that long ago, years ago in the 90s, there was a senator in the United States that he had this really funny definition. They said, you know, Senator, what's your definition of porn? And he goes, I don't have a definition for porn, but I know it when I see it. And so, you know, I always say, I don't have a definition for abuse of our vacation policy, but I know it when I see it. And when somebody comes to me every single Friday and says, I need the day off, or every single Monday and says, I need the day off, that is abuse, you know, and I can tell. And we've had discussions about that with people. When somebody comes to me and says, hey, my best friend's grandfather died and he was like a father to me, can I take the day off and go to his funeral? 100%, absolutely, go for it, you know. So I don't have a clear definition of what abuse of our vacation policy is, but I know it when I see it. So those are some of the things that we do different than other engineering companies. And honestly, like you said in the bio when you read, was I want to actually spread that to any small business. I think all small businesses can still be profitable while focusing on their employees, as opposed to focusing on the bottom line. I mean, obviously you want to make money or you can't be in business. But what I realize is that by focusing on taking care of the people that I have and treating them well, they've done an excellent job for me, which has made us profitable. And I can speak from experience when I say that we have been profitable. Not in 2017 when we first started, for sure. I mean, that year was a struggle, but every year since then we've made a profit. And most companies, it takes them 5 years, you know. So
That's awesome. That leads me to my next question. If you can go back in time and you can edit a certain moment in your life, similar to Back to the Future, or just observe that moment with your wisdom today, just be a viewer of that moment, kind of like watch it on the TV screen, which moment would that be? You can either edit it and change the outcome and the circumstances and the consequences, or just watch it again.
if I always say that I am the man I am today because of all the circumstances that I had in my life. So I never really look back at something and say I want to edit it or I regret it. To me, it's all been a learning lesson in some way, and it's made me grow and it's made me who I am today. With that said, if I could look at something a little bit differently or maybe change some of the way that I reacted to the situation, I would say it was my divorce. I think that I put a lot of time and effort into trying to save it when it was unsavable. And I would have probably given some advice to myself today to say, move on a little easier, move on a little faster. Don't let it affect what you're doing today as much. Don't let it affect the kids as much. You know, it was a real struggle, obviously, for the kids. I was not in a great space at the time, and I think that not that I ever harmed my kids in any way, but I certainly let them see certain sides of me that I don't want them to ever have to see. You know, whether it was anger towards their mother or anger towards their mother's boyfriend, or being emotional in a certain situation where, you know, where it felt like they probably had a feeling that they had to take care of me. And I never want my children to feel like they have to take care of me. I always want them to know that I'm there to take care of them. But there were certainly moments during that time where either anger was shown, or they might have felt like they had to take care of me in some way, and that's not fair to them as kids, you know. So that's probably something. I guess if I could edit it in some way, that would be what it was. I wouldn't not go through my divorce. I would, you know, I don't regret that at all. It was certainly a life lesson for me, but I think if I could edit some of those things, that's probably what it would be.
Yeah. What is the most embarrassing moment in your life so far?
Most embarrassing. Boy, you know, there's one that still haunts me from my freshman year in high school. There was this girl that I really, really, really liked a lot, and I was trying to get her to pay attention to me. And I just remember walking by her and going, "High five," or something like that. And then after, she's like, "High five, okay." And afterwards, I was like, "Boy, that was really dumb." That was pretty embarrassing for me. But I don't know. Gosh, usually I've done pretty silly things before. uh, my my wife is a dance instructor. She's a pole dance instructor actually. And I remember her teaching me one time how to try to do a certain move, and I slid right down the pole and just slammed right on my butt. And that was in front of a lot of people too, which was even worse. So that was pretty embarrassing. Probably those two moments. That was more in my adult life. How's that?
Would you rather spend 1 year in the North Pole or 2 years in the desert?
I spend every year in the desert right now, so probably a year in the North Pole.
Yeah, you live in the desert.
Yeah,
All right.
1 year in the North Pole, yeah.
But let's say you go to Sahara, and if you have to spend 2 years in Sahara, what 5 people would you bring with you?
I'd bring my wife. I think she would love it there. I'd bring my 2 kids, so that's 3, right? You know what? I got 2 grandkids, so I'll bring my 2 grandkids too. I think it'd be a great experience for them. Not my son-in-law. I love my son-in-law to death. He's funny, but I only get 5, so I'll leave him at home to take care of the stuff at home.
What's the spiciest opinion you have that most people disagree with?
I still don't believe women should be in the military for a lot of reasons. My wife hates when I say that. That's probably one that I don't believe women should be in the military. And I'll say that I'm speaking from a standpoint of when I went through basic training, the requirements that I had to do as a male were different than what the women had to do. And I always felt like if I'm in a combat situation and somebody has to drag me out of a bad spot, I want to make sure that person can drag me out, whether I'm a 200-pound male or 250-pound male, whatever that is. They better be able to drag me out of there. And when you change the requirements for somebody because of their gender, or I don't care what it is, when you change the requirement for somebody, it puts my life in danger at that point. And so if they have to follow a different guideline to be able to do the same thing that I do, then I don't think that's fair to me when we're in a dangerous situation like that. So probably that one, women in the military. If the requirements were the same, and a lot of women can do what a lot of men can do now. So, if she can meet the same requirements that I can, I'm okay with it. So it's more about changing requirements for somebody to allow them to do something that I'm doing.
What are some habits that you have to protect your mental health in such crazy times?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about this before when you had to step out, but I journal daily, and my journal isn't like, dear diary, I had a hard day today, or it's not like that. It's not really a recap of a story of my life. I ask myself, and this comes from Ed Milet, I ask myself 7 questions, or I answer 7 questions in my diary or in my journal.
Did you share the questions?
Sure. Let me just grab it so I don't forget anything. But what am I happy about? What am I excited about? What am I grateful for? What am I proud of? What am I currently enjoying? And who or what do I love? And then I kind of write these 3 statements that I've developed just through different things that I've read or listened to or heard. And I mean, I don't mind sharing those with you if you want, but one of them, the first part comes from a book that I read. It was basically, I can't remember the name of it right off the top of my head, but it's basically setting boundaries for business owners. And the guy had this thing, he said over and over, he's like, you have to be ridiculously in charge. And so one of the statements that I write is, I am ridiculously in charge of my life and my business. And then this next part comes from another a podcast that I listen to, Bedros Keuilian. Says, I control what I can, cope with what I can't, and concentrate on what matters. The next statement comes from Miguel Ruiz's book.
The 4 Agreements?
Huh?
The 4 Agreements?
The 4 Agreements, yeah. I am a warrior who conquers his day. And this is an Ed Milet thing that I added to it. I am blissfully dissatisfied, grateful for what I have, but always striving for more. This is kind of a Wes Watson thing, if you know who that is. I put purpose over pleasure. I put forth the consistent actions to make my visions a reality. And I added this part myself, create a revolutionary life. So name of my business is Revolution Engineering. And then I write down, and this is kind of what I was talking about when you came back on, is I write down my 3 wins for the day. Some people will do 5, you know, and that's fine. For me, I do 3, but 3 wins for the day. So like today, I had to finish up a proposal. So it says finished proposal and send to Carly, who's the architect. I have a powerlifting club that I help coach on the weekends, and I need to email them today to tell them what's going on. So I'm going to email the powerlifting club today, and then I had this podcast or this interview. That's today, and then yeah. So that was the 3 I have for today.
And do you normally write in the morning or in the evening or?
So yeah, then I come back in the evening and I answer 4 more questions, which are again from Ed Milet. So it's what did I give today? What did I learn today? How did today add to the quality of my life? And how was today an investment in my future? And then again, I write down the 3 wins, and hopefully they match. But I think you heard the tail end of this when I said yesterday they didn't. So you know, my wins for yesterday were I had a meeting with our accountant, so I had to do an accounting meeting. I needed to do some business development, and then I've been trying to write blog posts and just different things for our company. So I wrote down write something. But yesterday, what happened was I had one of my wins. Was that yesterday? That might have been the day before. Oh, that was the day before. Same kind of wins from the day before, but one of them said, Andrew, I was meeting an architect for coffee, and that didn't happen. He got sick, or his kid got sick. So I had to, you know, find something else. So at the end of the day, my 3 wins hopefully reflect what I wrote down in the morning, but sometimes they might change.
What are your favorite brands? What brands are you loyal to?
Apple. I've got, you know, I'm on a Surface Pro right now, but that's only because the systems that we use for drafting don't work too well with Apple. But I'm slowly phasing out of doing any kind of drafting or anything. And so I always say when my Surface Pro fails at some point, I'm going to go to whatever the iMac or iMac Pro, whatever their small laptop is. I'm going to go to that. Maybe it's just an iPad or something. So I'm pretty loyal to Apple. Otherwise, boy, I don't know. I like these shirts. You know, funny story about my ex-wife. See, you talked about this before. Like, I don't hate my ex-wife, you know, because I always said the same thing you did. Hate is not the opposite of love. The opposite of love is indifference. So I always kind of say, like, my ex-wife's just there. There's times when I don't like dealing with her, to be honest. Not so much now, but certainly when the kids were younger, it was a struggle at times because we had shared custody. But she actually makes our shirts, and this hat she made, this shirt, she puts all the logos and stuff on. But this is called Next Level, the name of the brand of the shirt. I love Next Level shirts. I just like the way they fit. They have a good fit to them. I like my Pellegrino water. That's my mineral water that I'm drinking right now. I like Pellegrino, but
the flat or the
it's the sparkling. Yeah, sparkling. Yeah. What I do is I'll get up and I'll drink 32 ounces of flat water, just plain old water when I first get up, and I try to I have my ex-wife. This is my Revolution Engineering. I'm getting mixed up with a camera. Revolution Engineering bottle. So I drink 4 of these to get my gallon of water a day, but then I'll add a little bit of the mineral water just because I like the flavor. It mixes it up a little bit.
Yeah. What's your definition for friendship? And who's your best friend?
I moved around so much, it was really hard to maintain relationships with best friends. Reggie is a really good friend of mine in New Orleans. He's the saxophone player, musician. Reggie Smith Jr. is jazz player. Boy, if you can look him up, he plays amazing music. But so Reggie's a great friend of mine. There's a guy, he's my real estate agent in New Orleans, Ed Shedlock. He's amazing. I really like hanging out with Ed. I think, you know, definition of friendship is, for me, it's like somebody that I can lose touch with for a few weeks, but the instant I see him again, it's like we never were apart, you know. It's almost a little bit like the love thing too, you know. Enough, I have this strange relationship with the word love. As much as my father loved me, I have a hard time saying it to those who are not in my family. You know, I tell my wife and my kids and my grandkids and my mother and my now son-in-law and daughter-in-law. I tell them I love them, you know, all the time. I'm not afraid to say that. Outside of that realm, like one of the hardest questions in my journal that I have to answer is who or what do I love? I have a hard time telling my friends I love them. You know, it's just a challenge for me for some reason. I don't know why. I'm trying to break that barrier a little bit. I have another good friend here in Las Vegas. His name is Drew Alexander. You know, he tells me every time I see him, he's like, "I love you, brother. it's so good to see you. I love you, man. I'm like, I love you too.
Okay, thanks. That's cool.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So I have this kind of strange kind of relationship with that word, but which is unfortunate. It shouldn't be like that. I should be much more giving to even my friends. I think again, it just goes back to being that child of an alcoholic. I get very guarded with my love and affection, because giving it away as a kid, again, we moved around so much. So giving it away as a kid meant, well, I'm not going to see this person in a year when we move, so why do I want to get this connection with them? And even as an adult moving around a lot in the military, why do I want to connect with somebody who's just going to go away? So it was always kind of a challenge. And then guarding the love that I give, guarding it, and kind of saving it just for my family. And again, for no particular reason, it's really something I need to work on and get over, to be honest.
Yeah.
I listen to Ed Milet's podcast, and every guest he has on, he's, I love you, man, I love you, I love this content, it's amazing. I've never heard anything like this before. Meanwhile, 2 weeks ago he had the same interview, but he has that same enthusiasm when you listen to his podcast. It's like, I love you, and this is the greatest stuff ever. I've never had a show like this. And the next week it's the same thing, So I again, it's something I need to work on, but I feel very guarded with it right now.
What's your relationship with God?
Non-existent, to be very, very honest with you. Just to be frank about it, not to try to pull any punches. I believe in a higher power. I'll say that. I believe that there's more out there, that there's something out there that guides us. I struggle with defining it as a single person, as a God, for again, no particular reason. A little bit of upbringing, a little bit of bad experiences with organized religion, and things like that. So as far as one particular person, so to speak, that we call God, but I certainly do a lot of visualization and techniques, and try to speak to the universe in some way to give me some guidance or help me in some way. Some people call that prayer. I personally call it visualization for me, but it kind of amounts to the same thing. And I know that there's arguments against that. I had a good discussion with a friend of mine who's a devout Christian, and I don't, I have a lot of respect for him. And I kind of said the same thing to him, and he's like, it's not the same, not the same at all. I'm like, okay, I can respect you for saying that, and it's okay. Let's agree to disagree. Again, I try not to. Obviously, I have my own values and my own value system, but I don't want to hold anybody else's values against them unless they impede on mine in some way. But other than that, like, your value system is your value system, and I respect you for that.
I believe that a relationship with God is directly connected to a relationship with our fathers. And, do you feel that we were created or we just appeared?
That's a great question. I don't know, boy, that's a profound question. There had to be something, right? There had to be something that happened to create what we call as life, and whether it was an instantaneous creation of this human form that we live today, or whether it was a slow evolution to develop who we are today. I think something had to start that process, or maybe it was someone, to your point.
Well, as an engineer, if you start looking at our bodies and our brains and just like take the heart as an organ, and it's so incredible, and it's just the intelligence involved in thousands of organs in our bodies that are operating on their own. Or when you look at nature and you look at a tree and what trees can do and how they combine powers with other things, and it's just like, it feels like something incredibly intelligent has created those things.
Yeah.
And sometimes, obviously, if we think of God as a person, it's very limiting because we can't explain most of the things ourselves. But if you replace, like, what is the universe? How do you imagine the universe? Is that something that is how do you imagine the universe? Because if you ask the universe,
so expansive,
who started the universe?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, you get wrapped up in these thoughts, and it's it's so profound, and to the point that I'm like, I don't know if I could wrap my head around it, you know, and everybody has their own example. And so I totally understand it. Again, I totally get this, like, there must have been some type of power, and what is that? And that's what no one knows. And I saw a great video clip the other day, and it was like, you know, this guy was like, science, science, science. And the guy's like, okay, so you met, you know, Albert Einstein, and you fully understand his, you know, theory of relativity, and you read all of his works, and you've experienced it, and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, well, no, not at all. And he goes, so what did you use to believe that, you know, Einstein's theory of relativity? And he's like, well, faith. And he goes, well, there you go. It's you know, you're either going to have faith in science, or faith in God, or faith in the universe, or faith in something. We have to, there's no way to know. There's no way to know what's on the other side of this life. You know, when at the end of the day, what's going to happen? Is it reincarnation, like the Buddhists believe? Is it, you know, we go to heaven? And I was raised Mormon, and Mormons believe there's 3 different levels of heaven. You know, which level am I going to go to? And that was always the thing when you were a kid, is like, I want to go to heaven, but I don't know what level I want to be in. You know, how good do I want to be? You know, and so there's all these different beliefs out there, and you can only tell yourself what that's going to be. You have to have faith in whatever you think that is, and that's why I say I respect people who have a strong faith in God, or a strong faith in Buddha, or a strong faith in Allah, or a strong faith in, my wife says, Pele. You know, we lived on the islands for 3 years, and Pele's for those who don't know, the
king of football.
The king of football. Right. She's the goddess of the volcano. You know, she's a volcano goddess. And
in Hawaii?
In Hawaii, yeah. And she kind of is, you know, in their mythology, or their religion, if you want to call it that, the controls the weather. You know, and she's like, man, it doesn't rain a whole lot when I'm in New Orleans, and it certainly doesn't rain when I'm in Las Vegas, and it doesn't rain when I go to Hawaii, and because I pray to Pele every day that it's not going to rain on me, you know. And so, you know, here in Vegas, there's a famous magician, Penn and Teller, Penn created, he calls it the Church of Bacon, and they get together, and they're a group of atheists, and they get together on Sundays, and they hang out, and they chit chat, and they have coffee and bacon and whatever else they want. And he created this whole religion, calls it Church of Bacon. You know, so I don't know. I mean, whatever it is, I guess it's kind of your own personal belief, and you have to have a strong faith in whatever it is that you believe. I do think you have to have a strong faith in that, and hold it as a value. And you know, certainly values can change over time. Things that people hold sacred from when they're kids, or when they're in their 20s or 30s, might be different than what they hold sacred today.
As a logical person, you're skeptical because you've seen so many religious movements fail people and taking advantage of people and control people through the years and through history. So it's okay to have resentment towards religion, but it's good to dive deep into creation and
it's fascinating,
and having relationship with that limitless intelligence, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Because you're definitely seeking it if you are visualizing, if you're affirming, and if you're doing some sort of praying and putting things into existence. You're searching for the relationship. And,
for sure.
And I encourage you to dive into doing research. I wasn't raised I was raised with like Orthodox Christianity, which is, it's really people pretending to believe in God and doing everything that the world is doing. Really afraid of God, and I've studied all these religions like Buddhism. Like growing up from in my 20s, I was searching for the truth, and I was very skeptical, and I knew religion is not the answer, but I wanted to study them and try to find something. And I went through Buddhism and New Age and just different. I read a lot of books in history and religious leaders. I studied the Mormons, and I found Jesus in every single one of them. Like so, then I gave my life to Jesus about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's been incredible, the testimonies I have, and the certainty about existence of God. I named my child Jesse, which means God exists. So it's but I don't mean to push it on you. It's just you
That's great.
do your own research. But I encourage you to search for the truth, because you are a man of logic, and it's going to give you so much peace. It's a good thing, I think, to fill the void that was left by, we all have complicated relationship with our fathers. 99% of men do. There are very few men that had impeccable father, and most of them were trying to figure it out themselves. It comes from their father. And
Yeah, for sure.
father. So we don't blame them. We love them. They taught us lessons, and I feel that this relationship is filled from the void is filled from the ultimate father, which is God, because there's a creator who had incredible intelligence, just because so many things are just on autopilot. Like,
yeah,
the main reason why people died from COVID is the things that GM was building, not generators, but what were they building that helps you breathe? You remember what I'm talking about?
Respirators.
Yeah. So what this does, when they put you on this for like 12 hours, and you don't have to think about breathing right now. You don't have to tell your heart to beat with certain amounts of certain times per minute. You don't have to tell your black liver to filter all the toxins. You don't have to tell any of these thousands of systems that are working. Imagine how complicated is an airplane,
Right.
and how many systems are working. A human had to set up all this system. Like in your job, engineering, a human had to set up all the wires, all the work. And when somebody undermines this work, you could take offense. You'd be like, do you know how much work we've put into just plan this, to connect all this? And that's why you have this satisfaction, because you go into the finished product and you're like, oh, we did this.
Yeah, for sure.
And imagine every single part of the world has been created with this extreme intelligence that after thousands of years, people are still trying to figure it out in every day, and including Einstein and all the smartest people in the world.
Sure.
So there has to be a capacity that we cannot comprehend, that we could not understand, but it's something greater than humans. And if you were the creator, would you want your creations to know everything, or would you keep a moment of surprise? Because probably
yeah,
you probably, like, sometimes when you work for a big client, and you put in so much work behind the scenes, you kind of want to have them have the satisfaction of the aha moment, kind of like clap, boom, look at this, and they're like, wow, how did you do that, Chris?
Yeah.
Like, well, I can't share all my secrets. So so I think that God is preparing us for this moment of wow. And but yeah, there's a lot of people say God is love. Love is God. So I asked you about God because we were talking about love and how you're having a hard time saying I love you to other people. And love is meant to flow. If he's the source of love, we have to open our hearts for love and use our hearts as a vessel so we can pass it on to other people. So a lot of people abuse that word, and maybe that's where your turnoff comes from, because a lot of people use it so lightly. Like, I love you, I love it. You don't love me. Like,
yeah, right. Yeah. Especially when you have a few too many drinks. I love you, man. No, you don't. You're just drunk.
Say it to strangers. So a lot of people abuse love and they don't really mean it. So to you, love is a big deal, and that's why you don't use it lightly, because it's important to you. Receiving it is precious to you, and giving it is precious to you, and you only do it when you intentionally, genuinely mean it. So that's why it's a difficult relationship, but it's abundance of love. There's abundance of love. There's limitless resources, so it's okay to give
it's not a finite resource. That's one thing that I and it is one thing that I'm learning, is it's not a finite resource, and it's you know, I don't love one of my kids more than the other. And because I now have two grandkids, that doesn't mean that there's not somebody that I have to love less to be able to love my grandkids. You know, it's not a finite resource. It's, to your point, infinite. I love all of my kids and grandkids equally. You know, some days I may not like them as much as others, but that doesn't mean I don't always love them. You know, and we used to kind of joke around when the kids were younger, and they'll go, "Which one is your favorite?" And you go, "Well, it depends on the day." You know, and you know, same thing with my wife. Like, I love her, and that's not gonna go away. You know, and because I have two more grandkids, or because I have a good friend who's come into my life, or, you know, one person I do say it to is Reggie. Like I said, I really, I feel like I've been a little bit of a mentor to Reggie. At least I hope I have, and in some ways he's been a mentor to me. He's about maybe 15 years or so younger than I am. So I'm hoping I can be a mentor to him in his business and in his life. And certainly when we're smoking cigars on the balcony and talking about different things, you know, a lot of stuff comes up, and it's always really great to have those conversations with him. And he's one person that I'm like, "Hey man, I love you. It's good to see you. I'm glad you came over tonight." But otherwise, you know, that's pretty, like I said, guarded word for me.
Yeah. And you do love them with the same power and the same intensity,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a different love. Like the way you love your mom, the way you love your daughter, the way you love your
Sure.
grandchild. It's just different. And there's a big difference between loving somebody and liking somebody. There's a harsh saying, there are many people who killed people they love, but no one ever killed anyone they liked.
That's funny. I mean, it's not funny, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
To like someone, it's like a personal preference. It's like really connection of the soul. So liking is just as powerful as loving,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a different experience, I think, because
Sure.
sometimes you gotta love somebody by default. You know, you just have to love them.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you about the current climate in the world. What's your view on the world? What do you think is wrong with the world right now in the United States, and how do you see the next 12 to 24 months unfolding? What's your projection?
Um, yeah, I think that there is there's too much focus on the outliers, in my opinion. You know, whatever that outlier means. You know, you have this 1 to 2% of people who speak the loudest, and then it feels like from that standpoint, because they're speaking so loudly, you have to pay attention to them, and you have to give them credit for something. Um, you know, and whatever that movement might be. And it's, I don't like to lean one way or the other on politics. I feel like I'm very in the middle. And I think that's probably 98% of the population is right down the middle. You know, I think that each person is going to have strong views on how the financial system is supposed to work, on how the social system is supposed to work. And, I don't think there's a wrong or right answer there. I think it's when you go too far one direction or another. And whether that's, we talk a lot about, being woke. I got to be woke. I got to cater to a guy who wants to swim in the women's pool, and then, beat all the women in their own competition. It's like, let's be real. Let's be real here. Let's look at the facts. It doesn't matter how that particular person feels. There's a fact of the matter that this is a man, and he's swimming against, or running, or playing basketball, or wrestling, or fighting, or whatever, against a woman. They are biologically different in whatever way, shape, or form. But for some reason, we've decided to start to cater to this small percentage of the population, and we've forgotten that the majority rules. At the bottom of it, at the end of the day, it's the majority that we should be catering to. And so I feel like our politicians have lost sight of what their job is. Interestingly enough, there was a politician in Las Vegas who basically said, well, I was voted in because my constituents want me to do what I want to do. They believed in me, and they want me to do what I want to do. And my response was, no, we want you to do what we tell you to do. You work for us, not the other way around. And your opinion, while it matters in your own personal relationship or whatever that is, in your job as a politician, my opinion matters. Or the opinion of everybody who's saying we need to do this And you're saying, well, no, because my opinion is, in that situation, your opinion doesn't matter. Our opinion matters as the group who's telling you what we want you to do. And I feel like in a lot of sense that politicians have lost sight that they work for us and not the other way around. We don't work for them. I think there's a big failure in our system in that way. I think the two-party system is a failure. And I feel like everything is so polarized right now. You're either right or you're left, or, you know, and there is no in between. And if you're left, you're wrong because, and if you're right, you're wrong because, as opposed to saying, well, there's some good things on the left and there's some good things on the right, but it's created this division in our country. And I mean, you know, look, what's the motto? United we stand, divided we fall. And I think if we can't correct that in some way, we're destined to fail. I'm reading an interesting book right now. It's How the Irish Saved Civilization. And I just started the book, but essentially the concept is that the Irish the Irish monks were the gap between the Roman era and the medieval era. And they were the ones who translated a lot of the documentation between the Romans to the medieval era. And so I haven't gotten too far into it, but one of the things they talked about is the fall of Rome and how did Rome fall? And it just talks a lot about some of the complacency in things that happened. You know, it was, well, the barbarians, the German barbarians are coming. It's not that big of a deal. We're Rome. We can take care of it. You look today and you're like, wow, the masses are coming from the south, you know, from the southern border, masses and masses of people are coming, but it's okay. It's our American way of life, and it's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. And I just feel, you know, or I heard something the other day about the Chinese spy balloon or weather balloon or whatever you want to call it, and you're like, well, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a balloon, you know, who cares, you know, or all of our products are made in China now, or we outsource everything to the Philippines or to Mexico or to India or wherever that might be. We're going to outsource everything. It's not that big a deal. I get to save a little bit of money. And one of my values as a business owner is I'm not outsourcing. I am hiring people local to the United States. I mean, I have people in Boulder, I have people in South Carolina, I have people in New Orleans, Hawaii, but we're local to the United States. I'm not going to outsource my drafting services to someplace outside of the U.S. I want to keep that money in the U.S. And it's probably an outdated and maybe biased opinion of Reaganomics, essentially, you know, from 1984, where it's just trickle down economic theory, where if I give money to you to do a job, then you're going to then spend that money in your community, which then grows your community, grows that business, you know, on down the line, right? Yeah. And maybe it's outdated or you know, maybe it's kind of small thinking, but that's just my opinion of it. And so I think we've gotten away from that. I think we've gotten away from our values as Americans in general, and have gotten away from supporting Americans in general, that American community, that American sense of pride that was there in the 40s and the 50s. You know, and I really started slowly becoming interested in figuring out, well, when did this start to deteriorate? When did that happen? And a lot of people might say, well, it happened in, you know, when we voted in Trump, or it happened when we voted in Obama, or it happened when we voted in Clinton, or I don't know. I think it happened sooner than that. I think that the way we are today is a direct result of something, to your point, that happened in our grandfather's generation, and not as a direct result of something that we've done in the last 5 years, 10 years, or even 20 years. I think it's probably more of a result of things that we're starting to put in place from 50, 60, maybe even 100 years ago. You know, I don't know. It's hard to say, but I would love to dive into that more. It's curious thought process for me. I don't think things happen instantaneously. You know, usually, I mean, I look at our healthcare system today, and I think it's probably a direct reflection of things that were put in place in the what am I trying to say? During like Obama's time. You know, I think a lot of our healthcare system failures right now are a direct result of that policy that was put in place. I think there were good policies that he put in place. I don't think that was one of them. So all that to say is that policies that are created today don't always necessarily affect us immediately. It'll take 20, 30, sometimes 60 years to have an effect. And I think a lot of what we're seeing today is a direct result of, not direct, but maybe an indirect result of something that was put into place 60, 70 years ago, you know?
Yeah. Well, I've lived here for 20 years, and when I first came, the economy was way, way better. People were still complaining. That's when George Bush was just being elected. And there was like a light switch with, I think with 9/11 kind of changed privacy law and just the control that leads to where we are today,
For sure.
where, like you mentioned, they're no longer servants, but they're now rulers. And, coming from a country that has communist and socialist background, I can smell this stuff from miles away.
I bet. Yeah, I bet.
And in any other country in the world, there is no such freedom as there is in America. Like,
Mhm.
to be able to be nobody and just with hard work and discipline build something incredible, that's not possible in any other country in the world, where you can just come, put your head down, work, and buy a car and buy a house and start a team and get a loan, and and operate and be protected by the law to pursue your happiness. That just doesn't happen in other countries.
For
and
sure.
and like you shared, the majority decides. That's the beautiful part about capitalism, that the market and people's pockets are going to decide what's a good product, what's a good service, what's a um, good thing to invest in. And this is what's happening now with a lot of companies that were radical with the woke movement, and they're losing a lot of money. Like Disney had lost 50% of their revenue in
Mhm.
one
Yeah,
year,
for sure.
and Musk just canceled them on Twitter,
Hmm.
and they've lost 280 million subscribers or something like that. I'm like, how did they lost? There's 300 million people in America. How did they?
Right.
But from all over the world, people are canceling Disney services.
For sure.
And out of the entire list, Apple was on the list too. And I've been loyal to Apple myself. And I'm like, there's one thing that I don't like about Apple. Two things actually I don't like. Maybe three things. But I follow Steve Jobs a lot, and you remember
Mhm.
him. And
Mhm.
I think if he was still alive, they would be completely different company.
I,
Yeah.
my wife always says Steve Jobs is rolling over in his grave right now.
Oh yeah. Like they're basically keeping it together, and by
Yeah.
competing with um I think our computers would look different and our phones would look different. So they kind of ride on what he built and that market share, and just focused on market share. The second thing I don't like about him is you could sometimes their forget my password process fails, and you're putting the code, you know that this is your code, and it still doesn't work, and then you could jeopardize locking your own device, your property,
Right.
for
Right.
14 days. And like I get with them on the phone, and I'm like, you need to unlock my phone or my computer or whatever.
Computer, whatever it might be.
And they're like, well, the system locked it. I'm like, well, we still haven't given up to the robots. We still you are human, you can
Yeah.
interact with the machine, you can tell the machine what to do. Don't hide behind the machine. And this
Right.
is happening so often now. Like I had a check I deposited in the bank, and they used my doing business as name, and they've
Hmm.
already accepted like hundreds of checks with that name. And this time they decided not to accept it, so they sent me a legal copy of the check. And I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And I'm talking to like hundreds of representatives, and I'm like, why are we giving up to the machine? Well, the machine, the system. I'm like, forget the system. Like,
Yeah.
this is money, this is
Get
business, this
away
is
from the script.
yeah, this is cash flow. Exactly. Stop telling me I understand how you feel and all that, because I need somebody to tell the machine what to do.
Right.
And more customer representatives are sounding like robots, and the robots are going to do way better job than they are. You know,
Hmm.
they're going to wipe them out very
Oh
soon.
yeah. Very, very soon.
So I'm like, this is your chance. I try to inspire them, like, this is your chance to solve the problem, to be a human too. And
To
they're
be
like,
human. Yeah.
I understand how you feel. I'm like, stop reading the word track. Call your supervisor.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I feel like Apple used to have great customer support before, and now they're dropping the ball on
Yeah.
that as well. And the third thing is just like what you've mentioned, they're outsourcing everything.
Hmm.
And some of the stories of how they build this technology are disturbing, you know. they are U.S. company, and imagine how much maybe the profit is not going to be as incredible as it is. Maybe they're not going to be the most popular brand in the world, but how much different America would be if all Apple employees were here, or
Yeah. And I think it's in things that you don't even realize. I was watching a video the other day and they were talking about there's 4 major meat packing plants in the country.
Oh, I
And
was going to tell you that. Yeah.
yeah, 2 of those meat packing plants are owned by China. So how much influence do you think that they have on the meatpacking industry when they own 50% of it? So one of the senators, I believe he's from Kentucky, is trying to insert a bill that basically says that you can, some people have a hard time in some jurisdictions, may not be able to go to their local farm or ranch and say, I want to buy meat from you. Well, that's not legal,
Right.
or whatever that might be. And so I order meat now from, it's called Good Ranchers. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of that. I order meat from them because it's all American-based, meat-sourced products. Now, if it's packed at the meat packing plant in China, I don't know, but maybe I think that's part of the problem is we don't realize a lot of this stuff. We don't, as Americans, don't do our own research. We rely a lot on media or social media to dictate how we think and how we believe, and that's certainly a big issue too. We just don't know unless somebody tells us on TikTok or Instagram. We don't know that it's real or not. We don't do a lot of our own research, and that's whether it's a meat product or whether it's a phone or whether it's politics or whatever it is. We just don't do enough. We want this 30-second snippet. I don't have time. Just give me a 30-second snippet on what this person believes. Well, they're Republicans, so they don't believe in abortion. They believe that everybody's rights should be taken away. That's the theory, right? They believe in no taxing, and they believe in whatever. But here's these 5 things. So he's Republican or she's Republican. So now here's the 30-second snippet of what that person is about based on that particular definition. And instead of just sitting down and looking at them as a person and saying, what are their true beliefs and their true values?
Yeah, and I think technology is really, and media, just really bending reality, because we're no longer, I mean, I don't know if we ever have, but we've never been so far from universal reality. People are living their own reality. Like in Europe, they're destroying farms because of the climate change. So Netherlands is built on farms, and there's more private farmers there than any other country in the world. And it's illegal now to have a farm because of the climate change, which is like been debunked several times.
Several times. When you look at the reality and they say, well, it's the second largest producer of emissions, and you're like, you're measuring from the entire life cycle of cattle, so you're like the day that it's born to the day that it dies, to the processing of it, to this, to that, to blah, 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 to put it in front of your plate as a steak on the table. And when you look at transportation, all they're comparing it to is what's the emission of a car, as opposed to comparing it to the entire life cycle of a car. What does it take to build it? What does it take to make the parts for it? What does it take to ship it here? What does it take, to sell it? What does it take to do this, that, blah, 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 and then drive it? If you measure it, it's leaps and bounds. It's thousands of times greater than that steak on your plate. But they try to tell you that it's the second largest producer of methane gas. And to me, to think that an animal that's been on this earth, to your point, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years is now all of a sudden causing this degradation in our ozone layer is absolutely ridiculous.
Some of the things are just not logical. Like nothing against, well, I mean, if we get rid of meat, if we get rid of food, how are we going to exist? Like, nobody's asking that question. You get rid of all this. Or if another test is, if you put 100 people from the same sex in one island, whether they're considering themselves man or woman, they could have different genders, choose different genders, and leave them there for 100 years. There will be only bones
left. Yeah.
But so this is like clearly leaving us with the conclusion that there's no future for humanity if we keep believing in those things, So
Yeah.
do you
It's
think there's going to be revolution? Because this is happening everywhere in the world. Like government is being changing for many years, like you said, for like hundreds of years, maybe the last 50, a little bit more. But in every country, there's the same issues with government, rulers versus
yeah.
servants.
I think we have to fight back as citizens of whatever country it is. You have to fight back in some way. I think there has to be a revolution. Not to say that's an armed revolution. I don't want anybody to, go out and assassinate somebody or something like that. That's not the ultimate solution. That's not the real solution. And, there's certainly people out there that would say that's the only solution. But I think that there's other ways to say, no, I'm not going to do that. And you and I both listen to Andy Frisella a lot. And a lot of his thing is to say it's personal responsibility, or
Yeah.
personal accountability is the ultimate rebellion. So it starts with you as a person. You have to be the one that takes care of yourself. And I don't want to say if you don't eat a steak, or if you're a vegan, you're a bad person. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if you want to be a vegan and eat because it makes you feel good. We have a really good friend of ours who's vegan, and she has turned her health around and all these kinds of things. Now, supplements that she has to take, whatever, doesn't matter. It's her personal value that she wants to be a vegan, and that's fine because it makes her feel healthy. If you want to be a vegan and then attack me because I don't, that's where, again, my value is I'm not going to be a vegan. I'm going to be the opposite of a vegan. Don't attack me for my value. And that's where I start to have a problem with people. So we have to stand up and say, this is my value. This is what I believe. And I'm going to do that for myself personally to start. And then I'm going to set the example for others. And it starts with all the little things. You talk about doing Live Hard, and community service is one of the things to do and Live Hard, and my community service, and this is easy to do in the streets of New Orleans. There's garbage everywhere. If I see trash, I stop and I pick it up.
Yeah.
Somebody posted in the group one day, you're at the airport. No, you're in the airplane restroom, and somebody has dropped a paper towel or a toilet paper on the floor. Do you pick it up or not? My answer is yes, I pick it up because that's my value. And I wash my hands afterwards because that floor is probably pretty gross, but I pick it up. I wipe down the toilet seat when I'm done using it. I'm going to take that personal responsibility to go the extra mile because I want to be the example that I set for others. So when somebody is driving down the street and they see me, because in New Orleans, I don't know why, I don't know what happens. I don't know who does it, but all that to say is that a lot of people just dump out a garbage can, which is ridiculous to me, but it happens. I'll stop and pick it up. And there might be hundreds of pieces of garbage, but I will stop and I will pick it up and I'll put it in the can. And hopefully somebody drives by and they're like, wow, look at that guy taking care of the streets of New Orleans. And then it's just a snowball effect. So it starts with you. You have to be the one that starts this revolution with, and it's got to start with yourself.
What's your favorite quote?
I used to have, that's a good one. Oh, wow. There was one I read the other day. Comparison is the thief of joy. It's Theodore Roosevelt. I like that one. I don't know. That's probably one that I like a lot. Comparison is the thief of joy. But I like that one from Andy. Personal excellence is the ultimate rebellion. I think that's a great quote from somebody. That talks a lot about one more. That's a simple, just one more.
Yeah. What is one final thought that you want to leave the listeners with before we close out?
I think that everybody faces adversity in some way, and one person's adversity is another person's maybe joy, or but everybody's a little bit different, and at some point everybody's going to face adversity in their life. It doesn't matter, it happens. And for some, like for me, it's when I was younger, struggling with a drug addicted father and an unpresent mother. And I think that made me the person that I am today. And so I look back at that, and I don't want to say I look back at it and go, wow, that was amazing. That's not the case. But certainly I look back and say, what's a way not to do something? How can I be different? How can I make a difference out of that? How can I use that as a learning experience? So I think a lot of what happens today is people look back and they go, woe is me. Boy, that was tough. I can't believe somebody said this to me. And I think if you look back at it and instead say, that was a learning experience, and whether it was what to do better or what not to do, Anything that happens in your life can be viewed as a learning experience or a gain in some way. I'm reading a book right now by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. It's called The Gap in the Gain. And he talks a lot about we look back sometimes and sulk or get upset about our past. You know, he uses a great example of his kid. He has 4 kids, so they got a cookie and they divided this cookie into 4 pieces, and they each get a piece, and his son eats the cookie and he goes, well, my piece wasn't as big as everybody else's. And you're like, well, wait a second, you had a cookie that 1 minute ago you didn't have a cookie, and all you could think about was you wanted a cookie, and you got a cookie, and the first thing you do is complain about the cookie, you know, as opposed to saying, wow, I got a cookie, that was great. You know, I'm so excited because I had a cookie that I didn't have a minute ago. So he talks a lot about measuring the right way, looking at the right things when you're measuring your life. And I think that's been a big thing that I've been doing a lot lately, is trying to measure things the right way, you know, measuring and saying, looking back on adversity that I've had and saying, okay, that was a learning experience. What did I learn from that? How can I do something different or something better? And then also celebrating the small wins, you know, whatever that might be, just the little things that happen. Yesterday, I you know, like I said before, I won a project. That's exciting to me. Now I can figure out who we're going to give it to, and then work on it, and then see it be built, and all those kinds of things. So it's that one little small win, that one extra phone call that I made, that you know, one thing I did nice for that person that actually created now a project out of that, and then now that's going to, you know, be revenue for our business, or a spot for someone to go see, you know, an experience for someone to have on the strip, or whatever that might be. So celebrating those little small wins. And sometimes for some people, that small win might just be, I got out of bed today. I'm standing on 2 feet. Not everybody can say they can stand on 2 feet, you know, so feel grateful for any little thing that it might be, you know. And if I can't stand on 2 feet, maybe I was able to get into my wheelchair on my own today. Or maybe I was able to use the spoon. My wife had a friend of hers who was an aerial artist, and he fell, and he fell like from 20 feet in the air, and he broke his back, and he's paralyzed. I'm going to tell you, he's the most positive person, because you walk and he's like, you watch his video post, and he's like, I crawled 3 feet on my own today. This is great. I've only been able to crawl. I was only able to crawl 6 inches 6 months ago. Now I'm crawling for 3 feet. Now I'm picking myself up and putting myself in the chair. Now I'm lifting myself and doing pull-ups on a rope without the use of my legs. You know, now I'm on crutches, and you watch this man's journey from 5 or 6 years ago, whenever his fall was, to today, and you just see these little itty bitty small wins that he's celebrating. And in the moment, he could certainly be sad and go, man, my legs don't work anymore. Or he could be grateful and say, I'm able to move another foot than I was yesterday, or from a week ago, or a month ago, or whatever that is. So taking those small wins, you know, I make my bed every day. That's a win. First thing in the morning, it's a win. You know, I try to drink, like I said, 32 ounces of water. That's a win. It's more water than I would have normally drank on you know, in a prior time. Celebrating those small wins, whatever those might be.
That's a great end to close this conversation. Great way to close it.
Thank you.
And Chris, it's been such a pleasure talking to you and getting to know you, brother. Let's be lifetime friends.
Yeah, I think that'd be fantastic.
Make it a great day, brother.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for the time today.